Welcome back to DemystifySci. I'm Shiloh.
I'm Anastasia.
And this is the podcast where we bring people together in search of the theories that are going to change the world. And one of the best entry points to finding theories which are going to change the world is looking at mysteries, things that appear in nature, in the world around us, that don't make sense, and trying to understand how it is that they can be happening. Now, for today's show, we're bringing on a guest who has brought out one of these mysteries and honestly has made his entire name on the back of a video of a phenomenon that people have come at from every angle on the internet to try to debunk. This is, of course, the video of MH370 being orbited by some sort of strange plasma entities and disappearing into thin air. Now, you can go to any other podcast and find a perspective supporting or dismantling this video and its veracity. Today, what we're doing instead is we are talking to the discoverer of this video, Ashton Forbes, about if the video actually was real, what in the world could be causing this phenomenon to occur? And that's really cool because it opens up the door to some pretty deep discussions about the underlying physics that is at the edge of being discovered. So it's bringing in all of our favorite topics from low energy nuclear reactions, plasmoid structures, ball lightning,
Disconnection from the photogravitational lattice.
everything that we poke around at here. And these topics and these people and these places and these actors seem to keep cropping up over and over. And so this has been a great opportunity for us to explore these further with somebody who has sat on the receiving end of a lot of criticism for this particular phenomenon, but has also had an enormous quantity of discussions with legitimate physicists and engineers who are trying to give some form to what is happening in some sort of situation like this, whether it's the disappearance of this airplane or whether it is low energy nuclear reactions and alternative propulsion schemes. There's a lot that we have to sink our teeth into here.
Yeah, we cover everything from the potential physics that underpins what is observed in the videos, all the way through to state disinformation campaigns and what that means for the people who are out there trying to actually understand what's happening. If you like this podcast and you want to help us keep making more of these podcasts, then I would strongly consider coming over to patreon.com/demystifysci. You can help support the podcast for something like 75 cents a week at the lowest tier, which I know that it's hard out there right now. It's hard for us as well. Everything is getting more expensive. But if you can snip off 75 cents a week, what that means is that at the very least, you will always have this podcast to listen to. Even as things get hard, where we go and we explore the ideas that let you, for a brief moment, disconnect from just the roil of life, because we search for the future, and sometimes you need a little bit of a glimmer of hope. And the only way that we can continue providing that without being inundated by sponsorships, advertisements, some kind of committee that decides our editorial direction is by having listeners sign up at patreon.com/demystifysci. I hope that we see you over there.
Maybe you have your own idea of how things work out there, something we missed in our conversation today. Sign up for our new segment called Paradigm Drift. It's a cool new little game show, theoretical game show, let's call it, where you get a chance to throw your name in a hat and maybe get selected to present your idea. You only get 60 seconds to intrigue us about it. We will have live music. We have a panelist that joins us every time. It's really cool. But if you can sell us on the glimmer of your idea, maybe we can help you develop it. Maybe you'll eventually find yourself sitting on this podcast for 3 hours, breaking down all the bits and pieces of it. So check that out. You can find it over at demystifysci.com. Signups are live. Our next show will be taped on September 5th at 7 p.m. That's a Friday.
And one of my favorite things about Paradigm Drift is that we take ideas and play with them without having to be preoccupied with the question of, is this true or not? We start somewhere after the initial assertion that, like, hey, I have this thing in front of me. Is there a way that I can explain it? And that's been one of the most fun things about Paradigm Drift, is that people come with all kinds of ideas, and what we're doing is we're slowly helping them hone their ability to talk about it. And once they can talk about it, once they can explain it, once they can make their presentation, then we can go back and we can say, okay, let's look at the starting assumptions. And this is kind of the same mentality that we used for our conversation with Ashton, where all of this starts with this video of plasma orbs orbiting MH370 and disappearing it into thin air. Danny Jones did a takedown of this with a bunch of VFX artists who are like, this is absolutely not true. This video is completely faked. And that might be the case. And yet, there's a bunch of people that are operating in the low energy nuclear reaction space, in weird plasma confinement space, all sorts of dark government programs that do seem to assert that they're producing some kind of weird technology that, in theory, could be capable of such an action. And so our conversation with Ashton is about that. If we start with this video as being either a representation of something that happened or something that we're aiming for, how could it work? So enjoy the conversation, and we'll see you next time.
The scientific revolution starts now.
The DemystifySci podcast.
Let us see in the dark.
We've been kind of exploring some topics that I think are a shared overlap of interests, which is these strange low-energy nuclear reactions, the possibility that there's alternative energy technology that's being developed, perhaps in black programs with the government, perhaps in small private companies that are under non-disclosure agreements. Shiloh has a really funny thinking face where sometimes I can't tell if he's thinking hard or if he's judging hard.
I was just thinking that it might be disarming to start off by saying we've had a really shadowy, weird experience with NASA lately regarding their cold fusion programs. Like, if I was gonna be vulnerable here for a second about that, I'm generally. It would be nice to say with a lot of the stuff I've never seen a UFO, so I'm kind of always just like, I don't know, maybe like if I saw one, I'd probably be a believer. But with the shadowy government stuff, we hit a third rail or something with this low energy nuclear reaction thing, and I haven't told this story on the podcast, but I think it's worth it. Like, I spent 3 years trying to get an interview with one of these lattice confinement fusion scientists. I would email NASA's posted these papers on their website for quite some time now, where they're doing these ambient room temperature reactions. They're getting the fuel densities that you would see inside of a giant tokamak, but in these tiny little substrates. And I'm like, that's really cool. And it applies to some of the other stuff we've been studying about the liquid sun model and stuff. So I'm reaching out to these people forever, and the scientists always write back, hey, your podcast is cool. We'd love to come and talk to you. And then sure enough, every single time some NASA bureaucrat emails and says, oh, the scientists are too busy to talk to you. They can't do it. I'm like, all right, whatever. And it's weird because we've had NASA people on the show several times, no problem. And for some reason, this topic, they just wouldn't talk to us. And finally, out of the blue one day, this NASA bureaucrat emails us, and she's like, all right, this scientist is really excited to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, like no acknowledgments of the fact that I've been, all this pushback for these years. Anyways, we get the guy on the show. It's kind of a long process. She's like, we want editorial control. Like, if they say something we don't want them to say, like, you have to cut it out. I'm like, okay, whatever, it's fine. Like, I just want to talk to somebody. Like, what are you guys working on?
And specifically, you were like, okay, well, we can just avoid those topics. What are those topics? And she's like, you have to avoid talking about the budget. And we're like, that sounds really boring and like something we wouldn't talk about anyways. Yeah. And so that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, I actually confirmed 3 times in 3 separate emails. Is there anything other than the budget we shouldn't mention in this podcast? She's like, just the budget. Okay, that should be easy. Do the interview. Go to post it. It's actually, we're kind of strapped for publications that week, so we're going to put it out the next week immediately and try to get to our patrons as soon as possible. So upload it, send her the link. Turns out she's gone on vacation, so she doesn't get the link. Podcast goes live, and she comes back after the podcast goes live, and she's like, yeah, the only thing that we need to do is remove any mention in the title or description, and ideally, if you could cut it out of the intro too, that this guy's associated with NASA. And I'm like, that's weird because he's listed on the NASA website. It's at the top of his LinkedIn, and you're a NASA bureaucrat with a NASA signature, and this is a nasa.gov email address. Like, what are you talking about? And she doesn't respond, obviously. And then she just writes back a few days later, hey, can you please remove those things? And I'm like, sure, I'll remove them. And I ended up just kind of like blanking them out. And I was like, but please, can you just tell me why you guys are pretending like this isn't a NASA project? Crickets. Still haven't heard back.
Let me ask you on that. Is that related to lattice confinement fusion and Larry Forsley's stuff with
That
NASA?
that that was
Yeah.
the interview. Yeah.
Because I, have been doing my own research on fusion, cold fusion, anything related to alternative energy sources, I guess. And that was one of the things I found too. I mean, the results are just out there. I mean, I was reading them myself. It looked like they're just bragging about like excess energy production in NASA. At least, like you said, I don't know. I mean, it's on NASA's website. I mean, how is it not related to them? Um, and I guess also another thing I want to point out is that I've also found that there's a bunch of black project engineers and stuff, and I think they also work with NASA at times. In some cases, they probably worked for NASA as well. If people wanted me to name names, I mean, I'd look directly at Sonny White for sure right away, just because of like his research into like warp drives and warp bubbles in the 2010s. And now he's kind of third party, and he's affiliated with people like Charles Chase of Lockheed Martin and other people where he's working on like free energy microchips. These are the kinds of people that kind of know about this stuff. And I wanted to know your kind of how you got to the point where you're at now, where you're talking with me, and I'm kind of have my own journey of investigating these like really, I guess energy is the biggest thing about this advanced technology that's kind of being suppressed. It all leads back to energy. Because I do think there's a lot of crossroads. I think where I found out about you guys, I mean, I knew about you guys, but where I was like really paying attention was the Larry Forsley interview, because you guys were talking about a lot of the same topics that I've been talking about and I've been investigating. Specifically on fusion. Where did we start hiding it? Where did we start suppressing it? And in that interview, Larry Forsley just straight up says it's related to nuclear weapons, related to nuclear research. And I just, that my kind of ears lit up when, eyes lit up going, oh, wow. Yeah, this is really what it's all about, is that, the highest levels of secrecy. So I don't know. I'm just curious a little bit more about, what led you to this point right now.
All started with the sun, man, for us, honestly. I don't know if you know the work of Pierre-Marie Robitaille. He's got a YouTube channel called Sky Scholar.
Yeah.
So way, way many years before we had this podcast, we started corresponding with Pierre. I found,
Hmm.
I mean, I find that the fact that you can basically prove to a 14-year-old that the sun isn't a gas with basic, like with a prism or a fire hose or something, a garden hose, sorry, probably don't have a fire hose. Um, that's really interesting. And once you go down the rabbit hole of understanding um, how a star would be organized in the absence of a gaseous plasma, so what the alternative is, which basically takes you to this liquid metallic hydrogen story, you have to come up with totally new fusion mechanisms. And so, Pierre's pointed to lattice confinement for a number of years as a possibility, and that got us looking into it. And then one thing led to another. And, we ended up talking to Bob Grenier as well, and it seems like a lot of the evidence he was pointing to across the years was happening in solid substrates as well. So lattices, right? They were destroying instruments and seeing fusion products. And so, this whole story started with the sun for us. And there's a lot more I could go into about stars too, and evidence for other alternative types of fusion. But the bottom line is that they've been trying this gaseous tokamak business for 50 years. And it's kind of garbage. Like, they'll put out these headlines every few years, oh, we're finally achieving fusion, and then you like peel back the curtains a little bit, and they're spending orders of magnitude more energy powering just the laser. Like, forget about like keeping the computers running or something. Like, and that's just not how power plants work. A nuclear power plant could power 20 other nuclear power plants. Right.
Yeah.
So we're talking for something usable. If this is actually an energy generation method, it seems laughable to me over the years. And the more that I see these headlines, the more I look at it. And then that points me back to, other attempts at fusion. And the fact that people don't want to talk about it makes it even all the more compelling to me. I'm like, okay, you guys are actually making headway here. And there's probably a lot more, I don't want to go like whole secret bunker in Cleveland, Ohio or whatever, but there's more to the story. It feels like, and that's my only real personal experience with somebody just straight up deceiving me in some bureaucratic position. And you know what? It's totally fine with me. Like, I don't
Mhm.
want the bad guys to have the secret energy technology too. On one hand, like, I can talk myself into that angle where I'm like, it's cool. Like, you guys want to do this secretly? Like, I get it. But at the same time, I'm not buying the smokescreen that all of this above board high energy giant magnetic confinement stuff is really the promising future for that technology.
That's interesting because it's clear there's something must be wrong with fusion or either our conception of how it's supposed to work or it's being sabotaged or something, right? Like, because we've known it should be possible from the H bomb from thermonuclear weapons, and the idea of a thermonuclear weapon is an A bomb detonating an H bomb, which is a fission detonation of a fusion um, catalyst or a reaction. And so here's the thing that I would just throw out there is like, maybe we figured it out with the H bomb when we figured out a fusion bomb, and then we just said, okay, this is dangerous. And now, something happened from it. And we decided, okay, we can't let people know about this. For example, what if it released more energy than we expected, than our physics showed? Like that would, that's the beginning, the origin of, over unity of free energy being possible through fusion, which is what we say fusion is going to do. At least that's how we represent it as like a unlimited green fuel source. One of the point I want to bring up is that you said, people don't want to talk about it. That's a really good sign. There's something eerie, mysterious kind of going on here. People don't want to talk about cold fusion as well. And when you talk about the idea of lattice confined fusion, it doesn't feel like it should be something that's in the woo. It's like, oh, what if like the sun is actually just has like a lattice structure inside of it? It gets like so hot, it creates this structure and it's relatively stable. We would think of it like a solid. And then maybe there is fusion happening then in that type of form, and then we can recreate that in solids. And that's really what cold fusion boils down to. It doesn't seem that wild to me, but they have to rebrand it because they don't want people talking about that at all. They want to make it all taboo.
It's really
Uh,
weird because like the sun has a known solid body rotation at its core. Like you can see from these acoustic studies that this core rotates separately from the rest of it. So like I don't know. Like, I have a hard time with this. So I actually teach astrophysics at a university, and I've looked really deep at the standard explanation, and it doesn't hold up under scrutiny for a lot of these things in a way that you can convey to an undergraduate. Like, it's not complicated. And so when sometimes I have a hard time with this. 'Cause I'm like, these are really smart people working on these projects, developing the gaseous model of the sun over the past 100 years. But and we've many times on the show tried to explain it to ourselves. How in the hell does this happen? That you have all these, super genius eggheads who are so far down the wrong track, and it comes down ultimately to like temporal and institutional compartmentalization. Like
mhm.
people inherit these models from people they greatly respect, their mentors. We've been through the graduate school pipeline. We've done this whole thing. Like you don't have a lot of time to investigate the roots of the fundamental concepts regarding your project. You're trying to survive day to day, get that grant, get that PhD, get that postdoc, get that like, right. So you're working on some tiny little thing that is at the edge of what's known in your discipline. You got zero time to go back and think about how Kirchhoff might have overextended his, curve fitting back in the 1800s. That's not going to happen. And so,
And there's
I,
also this really long track record of people claiming to have developed cold fusion devices as part of a scam. Like, something that's really surprised me about getting into these discussions has been just how much enthusiasm there is for them. And it strikes me that anytime that there's a place where there's a lot of enthusiasm, that's also a place where you get a lot of grifters because you can collect money, you can convince people that you've built these fantastical devices, but nobody really totally understands what it is, the thing that you've built. They don't understand the explanation that you give for it. And so it creates a place where there's a lot of charlatanry that runs parallel to legitimate work. And so I think that contributes because
and the expectations are so low, right? Like I know
mm,
a guy who,
Mhm.
I'm not going to call him out, but like he raised, millions and millions of dollars over the past decade for this fusion project. And it's just, he's wasted the money basically, right? He didn't prototypically iterate on it, but he built components so large that he couldn't afford to replace them once he knew better ways of going about it. And it's like your funders don't really expect you to solve fusion in the next grant cycle or whatever it is, right? So it's pretty easy to just kind of get away with whatever. It doesn't have to be nefarious, I guess is what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be even outright fraud. It might just be wishful thinking coupled to, oh, it's nice. Yeah, I can draw a few $100,000 a year to tinker around in the laboratory. And
Well, I
I
think you guys are hitting the main points, which is that it's not just necessarily one thing. It's like this whole incentive structure that we've built has allowed for this stuff to be compartmentalized and then suppressed because of that. Because in some cases, they don't have to put disinformation out. You just have a few grifters go take advantage of the situation and present their own narratives. Why would they stop it? If you're trying to hide the technology, that works in your benefit to help shadow it. Because now people go, oh, nope, it's fake. See, you've got these people. They're just selling you snake oil. So that means all this cold fusion stuff is fake. But if there is an element of truth there, that works in the benefit of the people who would want to hide it, who would want to use it, especially for military advantage. Because then you just tell people it's magic mumbo jumbo. And anybody who's peddling it, it's pseudoscience. The people you'd want to control, in my opinion, would be like the National Science Foundation. You want to make sure that the grants only go towards projects that are not going to be successful, especially in fusion, I would say. And when you look into fusion, you actually find, in my opinion, that's what you find is that you find it does go to a lot of these like hot fusion tokamak generators that probably are never really going to work. And I say that as somebody who's not a physicist, not a PhD. I just say I tell people this is my hubris that I'm somebody who just has the answer sheet. Like I'm famous, quote unquote, from the MH370 videos. But what's significant about those videos from the scientific perspective, assuming that they are real, is that we're looking at a sphere max. We're looking at plasma spheres spinning around MH370. And when you look into fusion, you start to find out this actually narrows down the possibilities pretty significantly. It's like we're not looking at a metal object. We're not looking at a metal donut wrapped around some plasma, like which is what we're trying to build. We're like, oh, they can make magnetic fields powerful enough that it can actually like encapsulate the plasma and keep it confined in the air openly. I don't care if aliens are doing that. I don't care if humans are doing that. It just shows us something about the world we live in. And so, what that would mean is when I started digging into that, I found two things. One was dense plasma focuses, which is a Z pinch type model that assumes more of like the filaments in the sun are what caused the fusion to happen. Like the filaments we see shoot out, kind of like with the plasma globe. If you have one of those plasma globes and you touch it, you wonder like, why are the filaments all spread out and how do the filaments form at all? There's some attraction happening, but there's also repulsion happening also at the same time. And that kind of tells us something about
are you talking
the
about the
base.
coronal loops in the sun?
Um, yeah, I think that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So like the plasma arcs,
Yeah, yeah.
basically. So
Before we go like deeper, I think
please.
it would be really fun to just I don't think fun's the right word. Sorry, I think it would be a good exercise for us to not even worry about whether or not that video is real, but to assume for the purposes of this discussion that it is real, and then try to make sense of how in the world that would happen. I think that'd be more productive. There's been a lot of other podcasts that have tried to argue this side or the other. Obviously you firmly believe that's a real video. Other people firmly believe it isn't a real video. That's probably like not worth rehashing necessarily, but I think it would be interesting to try to make sense of how this would happen if it were real.
Yeah, and with the fusion aspect, I think is the biggest, just because of your guys' own personal, experience in researching it and trying to get to the truth of it. So the point of it being that it's basically if those videos are real, then that's the guidebook, that's the answer, that's the cheat sheet of like, hey, how do you get fusion to actually work? And what I found out from that was I found out like Eric Lerner from LPP Fusions doing the dense plasma focus thing. And then you've got Tri Alpha Energy and Helion Energy who are doing the field reverse configuration. And the field reverse configuration actually produces sphere Mac with axial currents, much like we see in those videos.
All right, so I think we got to slow this down a little bit to keep people who haven't heard of any of this stuff before. So can you link what happens in that video to fusion for me? Because right now we just have this very controversial video of this disappearing airliner, allegedly the missing Malaysian Air. Is it Malaysian Air? Is that right?
Yeah.
Malaysian Air Flight 370. There's these orbs flying around. I guess we can plug in a little picture of that right here just for people. But can you link that phenomenon, that apparent phenomenon in this video to fusion for us? Because that's not totally clear.
Yeah, I guess that yeah, it's hard because people haven't really been down the journey that I've been down. But the first time I did linked it to fusion was when actually Bob Greenier, who's been one of your guests, I didn't know who he was at the time. He made a video, and I was trying to understand why this guy who's has these acronyms LENR at the time. I didn't know what that meant at all next to his name. Why he's interested in these videos? Like a lot of people were trying to avoiding them. People weren't speaking up on them, but he came out and said, I feel like I have to talk about these videos. Like I feel compelled. He's like, I've never seen anything that's like this fits in with what he's doing so well. So okay, what is Bob Greener doing? Oh, cold fusion. He's doing cold fusion. He says, those objects are exotic vacuum objects, like what Ken Shoulders was researching in the late '80s with Hal Puthoff, actually. And the idea of a exotic vacuum object is like a self-contained ball of plasma, a plasma that is self-stabilizing, meaning the electromagnetic fields of the plasma itself create a stable structure, an equilibrium structure. So this would be equivalent to like a smoke ring. Like when you blow a smoke ring, I remember thinking as a kid, like how to blow a smoke ring is that I would like stick my tongue out so that the smoke would like go around it. I would make a donut. No, you don't even have to do that. You just like blow, and the smoke naturally forms this toroidal vortex or structure, this ring structure, and it doesn't fall apart immediately. Why? Why doesn't it fall apart immediately? That's the same concept actually as a plasma toroidal vortex. Is that you can create a stable structure from the plasma field itself that will be stabilized. And if you can do that, then why can't we do fusion? I mean, what is fusion really at the end of the day is we're trying to get over this Coulomb barrier that this idea of this barrier where for some reason we can't get these things to come together because, they're the same polarity. They're trying to repel one another. So there's several theoretical ways that we could get over
And
this.
this, I might just add, just so that people can follow, that the stability of the fusion is the problem with these tokamaks, and we've been over that again and again. That seems to be, they can fuse temporarily, very quick pulses, right? But in terms of getting a stable plasmoid structure in these devices that can just power on and they can just, suck the excess uh, gains off of it, there's nothing even close to that, except, as Bob alleges, maybe in nature, maybe in these ball lightning is it ball lightning the same thing as the
Yeah.
state? Yeah.
And this is the thing too, is they use so many different terms, but ball lightning, exotic vacuum object. I mean, I just call it magical ball plasma that's floating around, but it depends on just, your terminology. But yeah, I think the way you just mentioned is a huge aspect of it too. Because when I started researching fusion, I'm like, okay, what are the problems with fusion? Stabilization is number one. There's like 5 different instabilities. And this is why the field reverse configuration, this sphere that they've created with these jets shooting out of it, is so big. Because what's the answer to the stabilization problem? The answer is you can't get it perfectly stable. We're not going to be able to get a perfectly sphere that doesn't radiate anything out. We're like, oh, instead, let's just focus the jets of expelled, particles, and we'll use it as propulsion. And now you've turned the idea of a plasma fusion reactor into a ball of plasma that can float around freely in the sky, assuming that whatever's inside is not heavy enough, doesn't have enough mass to actually weigh it down. And that's what I think the connection is with those videos. In fact, to what you just said, there was this creepy letter that was posted on YouTube that was addressed to me, and it was clearly connecting EVOs, these stabilized plasmas, and the idea that the government figured them out in the '60s and has basically been hiding it and using it to control the world since then. And over time, at the time, I was like, okay, did someone make this up? But it was really detailed and elaborate. I urge people to listen to it on my YouTube channel because it's better than any movie or short story or anything like that you'll ever see on TV.
What were they using them for?
They say that they basically, the way the person describes it is they kind of connected a little bit to sacred geometry, the idea that the government figured out a monostructure. And then if you combine monostructures, you can create a device that can, like you see in the videos, teleport an object and manipulate space-time.
A
And then a different
monostructure of
I assume that means like geometry, like a topological structure of plasma that causes it to become self-stabilizing is I think the inference that the video is trying to make. And that if you were then to combine those structures just geometrically in different ways, you can either have infinite energy device that just pulls energy straight out of the vacuum continuously, or in the situations like we see with the plane, either something that's annihilating an object or in what we would think of as like teleporting an object from one location to the next. Ken Shoulders even spoke about teleportation. There's even a clip of him just saying like plasmoids, these they can enshroud an object and make it disappear and make it reappear. And he goes, that's teleportation.
So you think that the if this video is real, you think your interpretation would be that the airplane is some like ended up somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if in one piece exactly. I mean, even when you look into the history of teleportation going as far back as the mythology has in the United States, which is like probably the USS Eldridge, the Philadelphia experiment. I mean, even the story of that, people were like stuck in walls and stuff like that. And if you just think about space-time manipulation, you would kind of have to perfectly encapsulate something or have some mechanism to target all the things you want to teleport quantumly, to have that quantum state perfectly come somewhere else. And if you miss something, like what if you're half in and half out, of the wormhole? I don't think it's going to go very well for you. So I'm just saying I wouldn't want to be the person in there. There it was debris was found from that plane. I do want to point out that my story is like the only story. Teleportation is like the only thing that makes sense for that debris because it's in the wrong spot. It's in the wrong continent. They find 20 pieces of debris. By the way, Boeing 777 has over 3 million. They found 20 pieces of the plane, and they're all found in Africa. But they're searching in the South Indian Ocean. South Indian Ocean's off the coast of Australia. That's thousands of miles away or thousands of kilometers away. And just doing the math, it's just completely implausible that all the debris will wash ashore on the wrong continent way over to the west, especially because the ocean currents go to the east. They don't even go to the west down there. Um, but if the plane was teleported from the Nicobar Islands, which is what the videos, there's coordinates in the videos. There's coordinates. It's Nicobar Islands, and it's like 20 minutes away from the last radar plot, which that should just be enough for people to like be like, hey, I think maybe the government should weigh in on these military footage that's leaked on the internet. But we can even tell it's being teleported to the west in the videos, all just based on electromagnetics, electrical engineering, right hand rule, and physics. The orbs are spinning around the plane vertically, perfectly vertically. Why are they spinning around the plane vertically? Like, why not horizontally? Why not any other direction? They have 360-degree motion. Well, the answer must be because they're targeting where they're going to shoot the plane. They're targeting. That's why they're choosing their axis of orientation around the plane. And then why is it going forward or backward? Well, are they spinning clockwise or are they spinning counterclockwise? Depending on the axis of rotation of the spin of the orbs, that's going to change your right hand rule to either forward or backward for the direction of the force. So they're spinning counterclockwise. So that means that plane is going to be going backwards. And what's crazy then is the plane's flying to the east in the video. In fact, it does like a hard turn, almost like it's lining up. And then it starts straight. It kind of straightens out the last second in the video. And then the plane gets zapped, which we presume to be backwards. So where's west of the Nicobar Islands? Oh, Africa, India, the Maldives. Like this actually makes more sense for the debris to have, drifted to Africa from one of these locations. So for me, I don't know exactly where the plane is, but there's a non-zero chance that it's like in the water somewhere, but like near the Maldives and nowhere near where they've been searching for the last 11 years.
So you think like experiment gone wrong, perhaps?
There's no way that was like a first time they've done that. I mean, you got plasma orbs defying gravity. Even they're not really defying gravity; they're just intelligent use of Lorentz forces. But it looks like defying gravity, and you've got them spinning around in perfect triangle formations and targeting a Boeing 777. That's one of the biggest planes in the fleet. There's no way this was like the first test of teleportation. They knew teleportation was going to work. They knew these orbs were going to be able to do this. So me, I think it's an operation. I think we're talking like espionage type stuff, like spy games, China versus United States. And sure enough, when you dig into the conspiracy theories that were already out there before I started adding my own to it, you find out, yep, the people were saying there's these 20 engineers working, building semiconductors, microchips, and they were connected to U.S. defense, and they were flying to China. 8 of them were Chinese, in fact, too, but they're working for this American company. Right away, I went, oh, okay, what were those guys? What did they know? And we couldn't get like, exactly what their roles were, but publicly they even admit that these were important engineers, not like people that were Karen in marketing or HR or something like that,
These
right?
guys are on the flight?
Yeah,
I
20,
see. I
20
see.
from the same company too, which is way too many. I point that out all the time. Is that 20 people? My company, I work for a big company. I have a normal healthcare job. And if there was like even 3 consultants from the same from our same thing, they would like flag something and tell one of us to fly on a different flight or something like that. Not that we
Somebody
would,
should
but
probably stay home and take care of the computers too.
yeah, yeah. So hey, just in case all of you go down, like we don't want our microchip company to like go bankrupt. Which, by the way, they ended up having to be sold the next year. So,
Wouldn't it
it,
just be
but
easier to get them at the airport? Like,
100%.
so what's the rationale for? Because okay, so my mindset is
Yeah.
this: if there is some kind of secret government technology that has been developed and has been in the works for decades, ever since the hydrogen bomb experiments, why would they show their hands like this?
That's a great question. And that I think is if you go to the letter that I was speaking about a second ago, where it talks about, these monostructures and plasma stuff, they say it was a message to China. They say that, this is basically what the CIA knew these people were going to defect. They knew China was going to run an op on these guys. They knew that if those people landed in Beijing, they were never going to be seen again. And they let it happen because they wanted to do this whole thing. Because here's the other thing is that it's not like all of a sudden this plane just gets zapped by some orbs. There's like a whole other aspect to this mysterious disappearance of the plane. This is an hour and 20 minutes after the plane went dark. That's really odd. Why we're zapping the plane an hour and 20 minutes after the plane went dark? Like, and this is actually, like 1,000 miles away from where the plane went dark, I think, or something like that. Not quite that far, but the plane first goes dark over the South China Sea. It's flying northeast towards Beijing. And when it immediately goes dark, everything about the event screams emergency event. You've got a guy who's on an oil rig, sees the plane on fire for a few brief seconds. And then you've got a bunch of people on the coast hear loud noises. The plane turns around, goes to the nearest airport, Penang. It's trying to go to land. It's got to be some kind of emergency event. It actually had to be a fire. And then why were they lying about like 500 pounds of lithium ion batteries in the cargo bay of this plane, plus supposedly some secret cargo that got on the plane too that nobody really knows what it was. And I would speculate that okay, if those videos are real and we're just reverse engineering what happened, that means someone put some kind of diversionary device on the plane. Like they set those batteries to ignite because they knew it wouldn't blow the plane up, but they knew it would cause a diversion. That way, China, whoever's like because they'd be tracking the plane to wait for these guys to show up in China, right? And then they're gonna black bag them. Now you're going, wait a minute, what? The plane where our whole operation was about to happen, like all of a sudden something's wrong with it, and they would be panicking. They'd be panicking. The plane's supposed to go land, and now United States military comes over the comms, and they say, your plane's on fire. Come over here. We're gonna have you ditch in the ocean here. It's not safe for you to land anywhere else. And they say, here's the coordinates where I want you to go. We're going to have you land in the water. We know it's dangerous. You're going to Sully Sullenberger this thing, right? And then we're going to come and fish as many people out of the ocean as we can.
And there's like cockpit recordings of this communication, or this is speculation at this point?
There actually is one cockpit recording that was reported only in the China Times. Only in the China Times. No Western media ever picked it up. It was reported the next day that supposedly it was an intercepted communication between the U.S. Navy and the pilot of MH370 of him saying the plane was disintegrating and they were attempting an emergency landing. And there's even a timestamp associated to this, 2:43 a.m., which if that's Malaysian time, that's 1843 UTC. That plane is in those coordinates at that time when that happens, which I just think is wild. And then there's Catherine T. There was another witness that was within like 100 miles or something like that, has a clear, great, detailed sighting of the plane, glowing orange with smoke coming out of the back of it, flying low. She's on a boat in the middle of the night on watch, and she sees this like plane in the sky. So there's plenty of evidence that corroborates like this what we're seeing in those videos, where I think we're clearly seeing smoke coming out of the back of the plane in 2 videos as well. And what that would mean then is this whole thing was like some kind of operation. It's not just a test situation. It was an operation. Now, they would never want those videos to be seen because, I mean, look, I'm a healthcare IT consultant. I'm talking to actual physicists and scientists and professors here, people that like you guys are seriously investigate these phenomenon like fusion, cold fusion, etc. And I'm figuring that stuff out just from 2 videos. From 2 videos, normal guy is able to go to reach that level of understanding. You definitely don't want China and Russia or Iran, North Korea, or any of our other adversaries to see those videos because they can definitely improve their nuclear programs with those videos for sure. But they would want them to know that like the United States was responsible, but they would just want us to know that we pulled off a magician's trick of making an airplane disappear out of the sky, and not just that, but also that we can cover it up. Because how could you believe that you could cover up something like that? Like, can you imagine the level of control that must exist, either directly or indirectly, to have people not asking any questions that need to be asked about how is it possible the United States government doesn't know what happened to a Boeing 777 that you're telling us was flying rogue for 8 hours past military bases, past over the horizon radars? No one saw it. Yep, no one saw it. Don't ask those questions, right?
So, if the plane is on fire, how does it keep flying for 8 hours?
Mm,
Yeah, because assume that I know
It doesn't.
nothing about this.
It
I
doesn't.
I I know that there's an airplane that disappeared. I have seen the videos of questionable, uh, provenance of these, like, weird plasma orbs that are orbiting around it, but I don't really know any of the details of, the timeline of people seeing things and the timeline of reports,
Well,
and then
Like the standard narrative?
just what everybody knows, yeah.
well, the standard narrative has almost nothing. That's the thing, and this is why the fire was dismissed. Is that we've just been building assumptions on assumptions related to MH370. And when you do that, you shouldn't be surprised if you get to a conclusion that doesn't really make any sense anymore, just like a game of telephone.
I mean,
And
maybe
so,
just to answer Nastia's question, I think the
yeah,
standard narrative, I also know very little, but I think the plane takes off. It's headed like northwest, sort of. Is that correct?
yeah, I'll just run through it real
Okay.
quick for you
Yeah,
guys.
let's
And
do
the
it.
standard narrative, the narrative that's formed is that one of a pilot was somehow responsible for this because no one can knows who else to blame at this point. But the pilot was actually dismissed by the officials, everybody else involved, which is why this is the biggest mystery of all aviation. So the plane takes off at it's supposed to like pull back from the gate 1830 or 1630 UTC. I'll say everything in UTC terms. 1630 UTC, flying from Kuala Lumpur northeast to Beijing. 40 minutes into the flight, takes off at 1642 UTC, so about 12 minutes after it pulls out. 40 minutes later, so you've reached cruising altitude. You're probably at cruising altitude for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. All of a sudden, plane goes dark. This is 1 minute, 64 seconds after the pilot has just had his last communication that's been publicly released, saying, "Good night, MH370." I've listened to it a million times. Completely normal conversation. No concern in the guy's voice at all. That's the last publicly released communication. First question people should be wondering is that's the last communication? You're saying this plane flew for 8 hours, 6, 7 more hours after this? There was no other communications? Nope. According to the government. That's obviously got to be a lie. There's communications that they're just withholding from us because they would just tell the truth of what happened. So 1 minute after that, plane goes dark. Goes dark. It's no longer on flight radar or what have you. And this is where we search in this location in the South China Sea here over the ocean for several days. All the media saying the planes crashed in the South China Sea somewhere. Then China media, the Malaysian media comes out and says, "Just kidding. The Malaysian military was tracking it. Actually, it turned back around and flew back over the country, back over the other ocean." What? What do you mean? We're searching in the South China Sea. Everybody in the media is saying the plane was in the South China Sea. This should be red flag number one, guys. If a plane really disappears from a hijacking or something, there's not going to be all this obfuscation about the truth. You had Malaysian military was tracking the plane, and you're telling us days later. Days later, why? Oh, because they're being told they got to cover it up. The United States government's covering it up. So, plane goes back over Malaysia, and the Minister of Defense of Malaysia as well does an interview several weeks later by what's her name? Cairo. I already forget her name. This Australian news anchor, really good though. She says, ask him about the timeline of the plane. He won't answer any questions about it. But for some reason, she kind of gets him caught. He basically admits that they knew the plane was not hostile. How do you know the plane's not hostile? Because he says, why do you not send up jets to track the plane? That's a big question. If there's a plane going rogue over your country and you're claiming to not have communication with it, then you should be sending up jets to track the plane, right? And he goes, well,
What
we
f-
knew it wasn't hostile. Well,
what
how
what
could you?
flight level? Do you know what height this was supposed to be at? Was it like way up in the atmosphere?
Well, I mean, the max the plane can go is like 40,000 something, 45,000 feet or something like that,
But it's
somewhere
up
around
there.
that range. They don't know. I mean, the radar information was like the way that the first radar information they showed us showed the plane going like this. So it wasn't really reliable in terms of what the reporting was coming out. So we can't really rely on the
I'm just trying to
altitude necessarily.
I'm
But
trying to get in their heads like why in the world they would think it wasn't hostile. Like did it have like a civilian beacon or any kind of
everything was
signature?
turned off according to them.
Yeah.
The only way it could be they would have to have communication, right? If you can come up with another way, let me know. But the only way you would know it's not hostile is that if you had communication, and that's what they didn't want to reveal to people. We know the plane was flying low when it got over Penang, which was the closest airport, because the cell phone of the co-pilot pings a cell tower, which is only possible under like 7,000 feet or something like that. So the plane had to be really low at that point. So we know that that's a factual data point. But why the plane didn't land in Penang, we'll maybe never know until they tell us the truth. But at that point, the plane now takes another diversion. So it was flying back to the southwest or west by southwest, and now all of a sudden starts turning northwest. And now starts flying over the ocean, over the Andaman Sea, the Malacca Straits, towards the Nicobar Islands. And this again is now still supported by Malaysian military radar. We're not relying on satellite pings or anything like this. This is just military radar. They just didn't tell us for days and days and days. And then they say, okay, it gets to this Malaysian military radar point at 1822 UTC. 1822. Around 1800, it was at the airport. 22 minutes later, this is the last military radar point, and this is now in the Nicobar Islands. Okay. You can take a ruler from the radar points, and it goes directly to the coordinates in the MH370 video. 20 minutes later, just a straight shot. Straight shot. If it's the plane just going straight, it runs into those coordinates, which I just go, holy crap, okay. So this is the story though, where at this point, somewhere in the next 15 or 20 minutes, at the same point we're seeing the videos, they claim that the plane takes a south sharp turn and flies south into the South Indian Ocean for 5 hours, straight into the South Indian Ocean until it runs out of fuel and then crashes into the ocean, supposedly into thousands and thousands of pieces. And we never found it. Now, the problem with the story at that point is we have satellites everywhere. There's no way you're hiding the debris field of a Boeing 777 in the ocean. We would have found it in under 24 hours. It would have been huge, huge debris field. And so that's the big problem there.
But the ocean's also really big, right?
It's big, and we also have thousands of satellites, and some of them are low Earth orbit. And so low Earth orbit satellites are actually like basically moving around the planet every 90 minutes, making a full revolution around the planet. And they go further, they're not in the same spot every time. So over a 24-hour period, several low Earth orbit satellites have mapped the whole planet. We only need a few of them to have sensors on them to a degree where you can catch something as massive as the debris field of a Boeing 777. And plus, it's not like we have no idea where it is. I mean, this is what happened. Then all of a sudden, they claim that, oh, we've got these pings. It was about 5 days later. United States intelligence sources were the ones that pushed to the media that the plane went into the South Indian Ocean. I'm not making this up. You guys can check for yourselves. March 13th, I believe, was the date. 5 days after the plane disappeared.
How do you know that the intelligence agencies were pushing that?
That's how it was reported. That's how it was reported in the sources and the media. And so I was just, you can just, that's the crazy part is you just look at the old media source, and the more I look at it, more I'm like, what the hell? We're running with this? Like, it says right there, U.S. intelligence sources say the plane flew into the South Indian Ocean. You're like, okay, great. So that's the new story then. So we had 5 days, built this new story. Planes now going in the South Indian Ocean. They claim there's these Inmarsat satellite pings. They say, oh, this satellite was pinging it. Well, here's the first problem. There's these geostationary satellites. They are 40,000 kilometers away from the Earth. So they stay in the same spot as the Earth rotates. So they're always looking down the same spot. There's like 6 of them around the planet, and they ping airplanes. Here was the problem with MH370. MH370 is in range of 2 different satellites. And usually, if you check the last logs of MH370, there 2 different satellites would be pinging the plane. Why is this good? Because you can triangulate the position of the plane based on these satellite pings, because you have 2 of them. But for some reason on this flight, it only ever pinged one of the satellites. It never pinged the other one. So because of this, they had to make these arcs when they were estimating these satellite pings on the location of the plane. They said, well, we know it's somewhere along this arc because we know the distance from the satellite to the plane, or we can estimate it at least. And if we had two satellite pings, we would have been able to triangulate the position at any point in time.
Is there any
No,
explanation given for why that ping failed on the second satellite?
pretty sure I'm the only person who's ever pressed anybody. I pressed Victor Ilanello, who was one of the independent group people on it, and they just immediately folded and just would not answer basically anymore, and then just start calling me conspiracy theorist, stuff like that, and then
Is
and then
this guy
started
like a
blocking.
satellite tech, or what's his deal?
That's the other crazy part. These are just like bloggers, basically. I mean,
Okay,
they have
okay.
some work experience in some of these industries, right? But it's not like these are
So is
like
that ping just scrubbed from the record, maybe, or is that satellite legitimately broken that day? Like,
So here's
is
the thing. I looked at the data myself. So next thing is, okay, let's go look at the data. Turns out that like the actual raw data was never released until like somehow somebody in one of the family members got it like several years later, and then that somehow got to Victor Ilanello again, and he posted on his blog. So some credit to him. That's how I found the raw data. And I look at the raw data, it's just 10 rows on an Excel spreadsheet. Excel spreadsheet has thousands of rows of this, it's computers pinging back and forth to the satellite. And it's like really inconsistent. It's not like every 5 minutes on the hour or something there's a ping. It's like just random, random, random. And then you get to 1840 UTC, which is when this plane would have been in the Nicobar Islands there. All of a sudden the data just like changes, just like goes dead basically. After that point forward, for those next 5 hours, when that plane is flying south to the South Indian Ocean, it's just 10 rows of data. 10. Each it's like a ping every hour. And then each ping is 2 rows of data. And I'm just looking at it. And then after that, it goes back to normal again at like 23:15, I think it is. It goes back to normal again. I'm just looking at it going, wait a minute. You're trying to tell me all this data is normal until this plane gets to like basically where we see it in these videos. And then where this story of it going to South Indian Ocean, all of a sudden these satellite pings are just 10 rows of data that I could have faked in like 5 minutes they had multiple weeks to fake that data.
and then it comes back to normal. That's the
Yeah,
even
and then
more
it going
bizarre
back to
part.
normal is the other weird part. Because it kind of makes me wonder like, if we're just talking about physics wormhole stuff, a lot of it has to do with time manipulation, space-time manipulation. And one thing that's definitely possible is time dilation. This idea that like you could go to the future. So just hypothetically, what if I threw out this idea that the plane disappears around 1840 UTC in the Nicobar Islands and it reappears somewhere over to the west, let's say hours later. But now there's a temporal problem. We got to account for this missing time. From our perspective, I mean, there's nothing really wrong. There's nothing really wrong from the people in the plane's perspective. They just went through a doorway and now it's just 4 hours later than it should have been before. But that could be a reason for why they would have to fake some logs, because now that plane is pinging the satellite again. The plane's shown up in the future and it's pinging the satellite again. And they're going, well, wait, why did it not ping the satellite before? And now it's all of a sudden pinging it again for 4 hours or 5 hours, whatever, it wasn't pinging it.
Let's
So
come back to that. Let's come back to the mechanics of this in a little bit, because I think that requires
Some
it- it-
elucidation. But so I just wanted to clarify. So basically, the satellite pings that you're talking about are all pings from MH370 along the way, and then there's these 10 data points that are weird, and then it continues pinging afterwards.
yep, and then it continues until the last ping, which is like an hour or less, something like that, less after the it kind of seems to go back to normal, which is a little bit unusual. And one of the other theories on the last ping is the last ping. I think I can't remember the exact time frame, but it's not like the other ones are every hour after that. I think it's like 15 minutes after that. And the reason why that one was big is because they couldn't understand why is there this last ping. If the plane crashes into the ocean, why there shouldn't be another ping that it's like it would have to be some kind of manually generated ping. So I think that theory that people have been trying to run with is like, oh, when the computer exploded or whatever crashed, that it sent a final ping, but it shouldn't do that. But you know what it does do that is when the engines are being manually shut down. So it's like, so the conspiracy theory people, they were like, oh, no, what's really going on is this plane landed at Diego Garcia. And then the last ping goes off because those engines were just manually shut down. And then it sends the last ping when it does that.
And where's Diego Garcia?
Diego Garcia is in the Maldives. It's a very secretive base that not very many people knew about before Malaysian Airlines. And then these rumors started swirling after the plane disappeared that plane was at Diego Garcia. CNN did a piece where they were just ripping on anyone that dared to believe that the plane could be at Diego Garcia, which wasn't really that crazy because it's a secret military base. The commercial planes are not allowed to go there. There's no commercial traffic at all there. And 10 days after the plane disappeared, a weird black photo appeared on 4chan, out of all places, 4chan. And along with it came a message saying, I am Philip Wood, and I'm being held prisoner by military against my will. I don't know where I am, and I think they've drugged me. And so people are like, okay, this is weird, right? And then first person realizes like that person is supposedly on MH370, the missing plane. So people look at the photo, which is just a black photo, and they see there's metadata on it with coordinates, and the coordinates are Diego Garcia. And so this is where the birth of this theory that these people were on the plane somewhere came from. Because honestly, if we're just looking at the facts now, looking at the same details that the official investigators are looking at, why do we think this plane crashed? Like, what evidence do we have that the plane crashed? A few pieces of debris in Africa? I tell people that's like finding my finger and being like, well, I guess this guy was murdered in China. Like, what do you mean, man? Like, that's not enough evidence to show really anything that happens. Definitely not enough debris to prove the plane crashed. So if we look at the satellite pings, it would indicate the plane was had a manual shutdown wherever it showed up. If we believe, evidence that's publicly available, although it's hard to understand why Philip Wood would post on 4chan, but who cares why? For me, like this is what I tell people: if that's my dad, my brother, or something like that, I don't give a crap that it's on 4chan. Go to Diego Garcia where those coordinates are and go see if my brother there is there or my dad is there. I mean, what are we even talking about? Why are we not doing that? Right? Give me one reason why we're not doing that. That would be what I would say. So,
Well,
and
I
of
mean,
course, nobody
people
ever
make
did.
things up on the internet. Like that's kind of the quintessential problem of the internet. I remember reading the Rand Corporation.
Yeah, yeah.
So
But real
the
quick on that, I want to say though, like if somebody's making up that my dad or brother or something is being held prisoner by the military after a plane has disappeared, that's a pretty elaborate LARP, and I want to hold them accountable. But we're still going to go check. Like that's that's my viewpoint. Yes, people make stuff up on the internet, but if they're making up stuff hyper specific like this with actual coordinates on where to exactly go, like that's where I personally draw the line. But go ahead.
It's probably pretty hard though to go to a secret government base on an island in the middle of the ocean.
Oh,
I
of
mean,
course,
I'd
but
have
that's
a
why.
hard time booking a flight there.
Yeah, that's why you got to put pressure because it's obviously a political thing at that point, right? Anyway, sorry. Go ahead. Ed. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Well, I mean, the Rand report was really funny because it was talking about like informational warfare, and I was reading this during the pandemic, and it was really amusing to me because one of the things that they were really perplexed by is that they were like, the way that people behave on the internet doesn't really make any sense. Like, our psychological models for how people behave in groups don't actually hold on the internet because the incentive structures and the reward systems on the internet are obscure and immaterial, and people just appear to have this quote unquote troll mindset that they just do stuff in order to be able to get clout or to get people excited about something. And so it's like I think that that's not beyond the scope of possibility that people are just posting stuff because it's exciting. Like, do you buy that like all the QAnon stuff was legitimate?
No, I'm
'Cau-
not a QAnon person. That's not really that was all just BS stuff. But
But that's
the
the same level of
no, I think that's
of
the problem. Is like you can't just equate everything to be the same. And I get where you're coming from with this. I don't actually even think that photo is necessarily legit. I can't really rationalize it.
again, like
And
how
I
does the guy get a cell phone and then
well, supposedly
reception?
he kept it up his butt. He says in the post that that's what he did. And presumably, but those are the questions. Like, how did this
Ouch.
all?
Yeah, like that's the
Yeah.
most 4chan thing I've ever heard.
Well, I mean,
Don't try that
I
at
don't
home,
think he
kids.
meant up his ass. I'm thinking like in his cheeks, right? Like
Okay.
are they doing cavity searches? But this is
Of
the
course
thing
they're
where
doing
like,
cavity searches. Like that's the thing. It's just
but this is the thing because now we're all making assumptions, right? Oh, of course, when they teleport your plane away and they deplane you on Diego Garcia, they've got a whole army of people doing cavity searches on everyone. Like I'm pretty sure it's not standard protocol, right? So I guess at the end of the day is like this is the problem. How do you know what's real or how do you know what's not? And at the end of the day, I'm not here to tell you what's real, what's not, because you can make those same arguments for the videos as well. As you can say, like, well, couldn't somebody just to fake this, right? Couldn't this just be fake? Somebody's just trolling, what have you? And that's the argument that the debunkers make, because at the end of the day, there is no hoaxer. I say, okay, well, who's the hoaxer? Who did it then, right? Like, can you find the person that did this? You say they wanted to do it for clout. They're not doing it for clout. They're not coming forward. But then the other side of it, I mean, you are right that there is that problem with the internet. You're 100% right about the internet. In fact, there was one person that claimed to be the person that made the videos, claimed it. They had debunker people like literally doing live streams with them, doing Q&As about how they made the videos. They had a bunch of people convinced. And then it came out that this Textures website owner released the DMs where the person was trolling from the beginning, show that they planned to troll for a year and a half ago, that they were actually trying to get the guy to falsify fake evidence that he bought these cloud photos to pretend like he made the videos. So to answer your question, yes, people do extremely sick things. Can you imagine, like, just for perspective, those videos are real, and there's literally people out there not being paid by the government just because they want to troll and be sick people, trying to convince people the videos are fake, like that, because that's what's actually happening. So think about that and put that into that perspective. So it's not just they're trolling to convince you that fake stuff is real. In some cases, they're trolling to convince you that real stuff is fake too. So it works both ways. And then how do you tell the difference? I don't know. What I would say is, what do you think should be the consequences for people like that? Where let's just say if it were to turn out these videos are real, what should be the social consequences for the people that were like trying desperately to convince people the videos are fake, trying to convince people that I'm a bad person for promoting them, right?
Well, I mean, you don't have to look that hard for stuff like this, right? I mean, we went into an entire war in Iraq on something that was completely fake, and everyone knows it. Vietnam, probably too, with the Gulf of Tonkin. Like, I mean, what are the consequences? I'm very sad to tell you that there are none whatsoever, and that Iraq has been bombed into oblivion. Thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of women and children died as a result of bombing campaigns, like, it's a freaking tragedy is the short answer, and there is no consequence. And unfortunately, people have become accustomed to that just being the way business is done in the Western world. And it's like, oh, we got to go invade Iraq. It's like, how many people were really against that at the time? People were pissed off about 9/11, right? And it's like, I don't
I'm
know.
proud to say I was very against it from the beginning.
There was
Uh,
a small vocal minority, and of course, a lot of people nowadays are standing up and saying they were against it. But where were they at the time? And
I was
you
at
know,
anti-war protests in San Francisco.
it's not an isolated event, is all I'm saying. This is kind of the program since World War II. Like, war is pretty profitable. It's a good way to control different resources. There's a lot of countries that are all in in the ring together, making deals behind closed doors. A lot of big actors, multinational corporations. Like, you can. It's not like there's one motive for why a war happens. There's a lot of peoples and entities that stand to profit from them. So I guess I'm like, one of the things that's been bubbling in the back of my head this whole time has been, you know, have you been the subject of any threats that you would perceive from institutional actors? And then I was like anticipating, if you say no, I guess that wouldn't surprise me either, because it seems like the John Q. Public is very happy to do the hard work of trying to discredit anything that comes out anyways. So yeah, I don't know. That was a huge
no,
rant.
that's exactly it. Like the Jonky public does do the work. That's why I think the CIA doesn't even have to do much if they want to hide technology, because as long as they hide it, everybody's demands. If you really look at where's the bar, so to answer the question before is like, how do you differentiate between the truth and the fiction? Well, everybody would just say, "Show me." Right? Even I say it. You want me to believe in aliens? Show me the body at this point, right? But all they have to do then is hide it. All they have to do is say, "Okay, I'm not going to show you." And then you give enough plausible deniability, enough doubt. You've had enough doubt that people can say, "Oh, nope, it's not real." And I think that's how it works with cold fusion as well. And to some degree, as you guys have seen, it is hiding out there in plain sight. They have it on NASA websites with the results. So you're like, "But doesn't this just show excess energy? Like, what am I missing here?" But
And there's a huge, this is totally off in left field. I don't want to get derailed into astrophysics, but like the entire institutional astrophysical paradigm is completely opposed to fundamental reality of how stars work and how fusion probably works, and it's not really, it's hidden in plain sight. And the fact of the matter is, like, it doesn't matter. Like, you can have a wrong picture of how stars work, and nobody cares, right? As long as everybody's on the same page about it, and people are getting their grants and going to their conferences and, dotting their I's and crossing their T's and being mathematically consistent, uh, perhaps applying the wrong math, but they're still doing it in a logical way. Nobody cares. Like, it's a beautiful smokescreen that nobody even has to be complicit with. Like, nobody even has to know they're participating in it.
Yeah, we're living in like a shared delusion, really, right? Like, is it possible we've kept all this physics, science? How could you have plasma orbs spinning around? How could teleportation be solved in 2014 and we're like more decades from that, right? Like, how is that possible? We're living in a shared delusion. We're living in a shared delusion where we just assume that we've got this view of the universe that we're being taught, being trained down to us through academia, through school, et cetera, that we've got it all figured out. This is the way it is. And it's just not that way. It really
Well,
boils down to like everything's a wave and not a particle.
I
Well,
just
it's
Nobody
want to. Can I just
really
say? Can I just say one thing? Because I
Yeah.
know people are listening. They're like, teleportation. What the hell are you guys talking about?
Yeah.
I do want to spend time dealing with that. So hang.
Okay.
If you're listening to this, hang in. We are gonna get to the
We're
freaking physics of
we're getting warmed up here.
teleportation. I promise you. But I want to make sure that we get this
Yeah.
background laid out in a proper way. Sorry, Nastia. I know
no,
you're
it's
about to
fine.
say something. I just want to hang in there, guys. Don't you
It's
worry.
true.
We
I
will
appreciate
deal
that.
with the physics here in a second.
I'm like, look, we live in a world where nothing is the way that it seems. And that seems like a really schizophrenic thing to say. Like, I'm always preoccupied by this sense of uncertainty and immateriality, because you look out onto the world and you realize that there is the first read of the world, which is whatever you read in the newspapers is the way that it is. And then you have the second read of the world, which is no, there's this other parallel world, and there's all of these hearings about alien technologies and disclosures and everything else, and that's what's real. And then there's even one level deeper than, I mean, there's many levels deeper than that, but the next level beyond that is that we are participants in some kind of informational warfare where the entire stack of what we look at is actually carefully constructed in order to conceive other nations of some narrative that benefits our narrative. And like, we're the country of Hollywood. We're the country that produces the narratives that go out and shape the world culturally and philosophically. And so it just doesn't seem that crazy to me that as Hollywood descends into, whatever like 15th Marvel movie garbage is currently on offer, that those people that are creative and passionate and capable have just been shunted to the production of a different w- Hollywood version of the world. And so I guess for me, that's the first principle where I'm like, what we're seeing is not what is. We're seeing something that we actually have to like be able to parse through that lens of, okay, all of it is edifice, all of it is constructed.
Yeah, that was a beautifully put. Definitely need to put that into a clip because that's I think I call it woke disclosure. I hope people don't take offense at that, but because I say that where it's all fake, it's all a production, it's all this planned disclosure about what we're going to be allowed to have, and then people have this view of like it's going to be like the Marvel movies, right? Because that's what they've been feeding us. The propaganda is that the aliens are going to come down here and breathe our air, and they're going to share us their secrets and make our world a better place, or maybe they're going to come down and destroy us and eat our planet or whatever. And I'm just going. Like, I feel like this is just so far from what it's really gonna be at this point. It's like we're talking about, what we're talking about is demystifying it. Like, that's how you have to do it. They mystify it. They make it more confusing, more complicated. So we're talking about the interdimensional aliens now too, to make it even spookier, as opposed to just like, are we dealing with like a wormhole situation where they can walk through a portal and show up here? Like, what kind of physics are these aliens using? Do they have access to unlimited energy sources through like cold fusion or other mechanisms? Like, those are the questions that I would want to know. But nope, everybody just wants to know, like, how cute are they on a scale from 1 to 10 on my TikToks? Like, it just blows me away. But I want to go back real quick to the point about consequences. Like, you're right, there's not going to be any consequences. These people that are shaping our reality that are controlling what we're being taught, what we're teaching our children, controlling what we're seeing in the media. I mean, they control every aspect of the world. This is why I think that Elon Musk doesn't actually know about it, because he says, well, if these people had these, if defense contractors had these advanced technologies, they would be competing with me in SpaceX. I just kind of laugh and I go, these are the kind of people that control the money supply. They don't need to compete with Elon Musk. They don't need to be the richest person in the world. They probably don't want to be. They probably just want to be a billionaire that nobody knows their name. Nobody's ever heard about them before. And then, they just go to the most prestigious places and hang out with the most elite people. And they all know that, super advanced technology exists, and they take advantage of it and monetize it. And they look at the rest of us kind of like slaves. So I think
Well,
that
how do you
does explain.
monetize a technology that isn't deployed? It's like, that's a little bit weird for me.
Yeah, and so that's a great point. That's actually a good segue back kind of towards fusion technology, which is, I find helium energy, I find tri-alpha energy, and I start looking at these fusion companies because I go, okay, if they've got plasma orbs, whether that's a coherent ball of plasma or there's something inside there and it's actually a reactor, whoever's got that plasma orb technology figured out, they've got to have fusion figured out. So which of these fusion companies out there know the truth? Some of them have to know the truth, and they can't all be a scam. Well, on page 1 of Friedwart Winterberg's textbook about the principles of thermonuclear detonation, he's a Project Paperclip scientist. He wrote several of the DIRDs that Hal Puthoff commissioned through the DIA. It says straight there, first page, says that inertial electrostatic confined fusion was classified because of its connection to thermonuclear weapons. In fact, it says right on the front of the textbook, if I pull up the image right now, it says right, and this is actually a quote from the introduction, I actually have it here. The physics of the H-bomb, which is the fusion bomb, is also the key to unlimited energy of fusion. I mean, right there in the textbook. So I think they must have had fusion figured out. So how are they doling out these technologies? Well, it's got to be planned, and whoever it is, who's the top dog of all atomic bombs, even the UFO topic, it's the Department of Energy. Turns out Tri-Alpha Energy, Helion Energy, these companies are all backed by the DOE. Their startup was like basically they were backed by the DOE to begin with. So I would say that the way that it seems to be happening is that probably the people at those companies, many of them don't even know really what's going on here. But what's really going on is like the people at the Department of Energy know, the IEC fusion or possibly like maybe it's they also speculate it's a combination of magneto-inertial fusion and inertial electrostatic confined fusion, some kind of combination that they've got that uses a field reverse configuration. Turns out that's what these companies are working on. That's what they've been doing. So I think that they've kind of been getting nudged behind the scenes. And I think that what happens then is like people that are connected high enough, like let's just say Peter Thiel, for example, connections to the CIA through Palantir, they get told like, hey, bro, helium fusion, they've got it. And what does he do? Oh, he goes and invests hundreds of millions of dollars in them, which he did, by the way. So did Sam Altman as well. And now helium fusion, helium energy, they have a huge contract with Microsoft to power their AI by 2028 using fusion reactors. I mean, I assume Microsoft is doing their due diligence on their contracts to figure out if the stuff is legit or not. So that's how they control it. And at the end of the day, now what's going to happen? You can see a future in 20 years from now where Helion Energy is a $1 trillion company. Peter Thiel is a trillionaire, worth probably as much as Elon Musk is, and probably more influential at that point, or getting up there in certain avenues. Not by me, but by some people. And that's how they kind of control the world. Is you play kingmaker basically. If you're the CIA, you don't care who wins, just that you have influence with them.
Isn't he actually a proponent of monarchy?
Yes.
Checks out.
You guys, just anybody connected to Palantir, just keep one eye open all the time when you're looking at those people.
I have an old
I don't want to
friend
go
who
that
works there.
sidetrack, but
Do
this
you
is
really?
Yeah, I don't want to call him out right now, but a man I worked very close with for many years is
At Palantir.
yeah. I want to hurt myself if I go any deeper into this. But anyways, let's not talk about that one. Hey guys, pardon the interruption. I just need to remind you one more time that this show is entirely paid for by you guys. That means we work directly for you. Nobody else is in the way, but the only way that can happen is if you check out our Patreon site. And it's really cool for you too because you can participate directly. We get together once a week, every Sunday morning, and chop it up about what's happening in this theoretical landscape. So I would love to meet you over there. And honestly, you can do this for as little as 75 cents a week, which is probably an amount so small you wouldn't miss it from your paycheck. But it makes sure that we have the time and freedom to keep doing this forever till we croak, I guess. So come over and check it out. Patreon.com/DemystifySci. Thank you.
This is something that surprised me about you, that you still have a day job.
Yeah. Yeah, still a day job. I think that surprises a lot of people. I was actually at the coffee shop this morning and was talking to somebody randomly in line, just having small talk or whatever. And then somebody walks up to me and they're like, "Oh, hi. I won't say their name. Okay, maybe I will. Hey, I'm Max." And I'm like, "Hey, Max." They're like, "Oh, I love what you're doing. Support." The person I was talking to probably had no idea what was going on. Somebody randomly just comes up to me. Um, and yeah, people at work have kind of realized what I've been doing now too. I mean, it's just been 2 years of going on podcasts like every week with people. But the reality is, like, I don't have Patreon. I still don't have membership set up or anything. I wasn't planning on doing this or making this into a career or anything, and I'm still really not, I guess. But I am living with like one foot in the old life and one foot in the new life. They are two completely different things. But I've loved what I do. Like, I joined this company that was called Cerner when I first left, when I graduated from college, and it was because they were doing healthcare IT and trying to connect uh, medical records for everybody in the country, and that's what I wanted to be doing. Was like, there must be a way we can connect all these medical records in the entire country. And now, 20 years later, I still have the opportunity to do that, which is connect all these medical records in the country, and we still need that. And I've gotten really good at that. Learned a lot about databases, software, etc. Even though I come from a business background, so I like doing that, and I want to kind of continue to do that. But at the same time, now I have this new calling where I realized, like, oh wow, free energy is possible. Maybe I'm using that as a little bit dramatically, but essentially cheap, unlimited green energy is possible. And that opens the door to essentially everything you see in Star Trek, including Star Trek replicators too. Um,
Yeah,
I
I
look
wanted
at
to
that.
I wanted
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
talk about the
Yeah.
replicators actually, because that
Uh,
seems like if we want to like, oops,
I lost him.
we lost you.
I pressed the wrong button there.
Uh,
Sorry.
you
It's fine.
teleported away
I'm
for a
back.
second. Um,
My bad.
We're
quick
gonna have to
demo
amend the timestamps in order to account for the missing time.
demonstration of teleportation at no,
Wait,
but
hold on. No,
all right, okay,
I know,
God,
Shyla. Really, I
So
have
many
one.
questions.
I
Okay.
have one
Go ahead.
question, which is totally like tangential. And like 5 years from now, what does your life look like if it's the ideal life that you have constructed for yourself?
The ideal life, if I
Yeah,
could do it any life, I would have no internet presence in 5 years. All of a sudden, I would have just dropped off the map, and people would be like, "That guy," talk about me like they talk about Ning Lee, that gravity researcher from the 90s. Like, what happened to that guy? He just like disappeared. Like, all his videos, like, just in 2028, all his videos just disappeared. His channel went dark. And I would just be somewhere doing Black Project stuff, working on, replicators and warp drives and stuff for Lockheed Martin behind the scenes. Because honestly, Bob Lazar was on Joe Rogan one time, and Joe Rogan asked him, if would you do it all again if you could, with all everything you've done? And his answer was, hell no, I wouldn't do it all again. I mean, I'm paraphrasing because I got to work with magical technology, and now what do I get? He gets ridiculed. He gets his life turned inside out. He gets made into this idea of a person that he's probably not even really that person that everybody imagines him to be. You know,
but
I'm not the
he
kind of person
also
that likes
we're
that.
talking about Bob Lazar, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And like Bob Lazar made a bunch of like real goofy videos about all this stuff, and so he must have been
Yeah.
aiming for. You remember Doug showed us those videos,
yeah,
which are
yeah, we
just
looked them
like
up.
90s camcorder
They look
videos.
really hi-fi for back
They
whenever they came out.
like they were very quality, but shot on like VHS. He has graphics. He's clearly decided that he's going to put together this entire thing. So it's kind of weird because he did launch himself into the public eye.
Yeah, no, and I think my perception of him is that he was a guy that, like, for me, like, I do a lot of, like, yeah, I look at this as an information war. That's how I look at it. So what I do is, like, I would say it is kind of propaganda. When I even do my live streams, I want to have my production quality be good, right? Because more people are going to watch if you have a higher production quality. So for a guy like Bob Lazar, I imagine he's looking the same way. He's like probably thinking he's going to be a rock star. He's like, hey, I'm the guy who's going to blow the lid off this whole crash retrieval UFO alien thing, right? But that's not how it happened at all because he didn't anticipate the disinformation apparatus. You almost have to see it to believe what they can pull off from the media perspective, you know? Even now, like we're now starting to be able to talk about some of the overreach during COVID, but the overreach was crazy. And a lot of people just went along with it, right? And you realize if they have that level of control, you're not going to be seen as a hero when you come out with this. They're going to destroy your life. That's what they're going to really do. And again, it doesn't even take the CIA to do it. It's just normal people who are skeptical are going to criticize everything you've ever done in your entire life. And that's how it all plays out. So for me, I look at it and go, what am I going to do in 5 years? I mean, if I do this right, then that. If I do it poorly, then I'll still be a social media influencer, but maybe a little bit bigger than I am now. So that's kind of how I look at it from that perspective. Because the other thing I want to tie into this is something that I'm recently attributing to Bernard Haish, who is a Lockheed Martin engineer as well. He's a co-patent author with Garrett Modell on a free energy microchip that they've been working on for several years. And he had this blog post that I posted on Twitter a while back, a few days ago, and essentially says that the elites treat the rest of us like children, like that we basically don't even deserve a vote, that we are so ignorant of the issues that we don't even, we just see the fakeness on the surface, right? That we're more interested in like who's going to win the Super Bowl than whether or not we can manipulate gravity, you know? And you know what? I think he's right. And honestly, I kind of think the elites are right too. If we're just being perfectly honest, you know, I'm impressed that I can even get like 1,000 people to watch my live streams because I'm just talking about physics. And for most people, it's really boring. So what keeps me going is that there's all these people who are actually interested. There's enough, a small fraction of people who are like actually want to know about how this stuff works. And a lot of people that come up to me, like when Max came up and like, you know, I don't even really understand all this physics and what you're doing, but like I can tell what you're doing is significant and important. And it's, you know, for people like that, that I think that we have to push on because that they're right. The only way they've been able to keep this from us is that we've been blinded ourselves and we've decided to be distracted by things that are, you know, more superficial than the underlying questions about the universe that would change everything, you know, forever.
That's such an interesting statement that you just made, that people will say that I don't totally understand it, but I think that it's important, and something that we come across all the time too. And I don't I haven't fully formed an opinion about that. I know that that's an important sentiment, and I don't totally understand it because I don't think one of the reasons that I'm not super passionate about a lot of the UAP stuff and a lot of the, even like Greenier's work, and I told this to Greenier.
Mhm.
Like he tries to explain to me what he's talking about, and he can't tell a linear story that I can maintain as a complete picture in my head. And so for me, that's the basic bar for becoming interested in something, is that when somebody's talking, I'm like, I have parsed everything that you have said. I have built it into my world model. And all of these things now I can go
You
out
need
and
to
I
be able
can.
to call up Alosha and tell him the story.
Yeah, like my brother is really skeptical, super computational, super rational. And so sometimes I'll call him after we have a recording and he'll be like, oh, who are you talking to? And, I'll tell him and then I'll start trying to explain it and I'll realize that I'm like, I talked to this guy for 3 hours and I don't have a complete picture yet. And yet on the internet, on YouTube, with with people who are listening to our podcast and other podcasts, I constantly am exposed to this idea of like, I don't get what you're saying, but I think it's important. What do you think that is?
I think people know when something's wrong, right? Like I almost think of like the movie The Matrix. Like what if there's like something a glitch and you can just tell that something doesn't quite feel right, you know? And you can kind of tell when somebody's confident when they're just being honest versus when somebody's confident cuz and they're trying to like sell you something, right? It's almost like the used cars salesman. Like you can tell they're not being perfectly honest about their, you know, their opinions when they're trying to sell you something versus when someone's genuine about it. I think there's a certain aspect of that mixed with this, you know, unease that they know they're being lied to on some fundamental level. Like people understand that the government has technology, military has technology beyond 10 years, 20 years beyond where we're at. That's what everybody always says, right? Well, what does that mean though? What does that actually, like if you were actually to quantize that into something, or quantify that? If you're to quantify that, What does that mean to me? And I think, what if I were to tell you that it's not 10 or 20 years? What if it's 100 years? And what if they actually have a plan for slowly releasing the technology? That the engineers involved with it are given permission to release certain technologies over time when certain milestones are hit or whatever, maybe something like that. Then you start to say, okay, well, now it becomes a lot more difficult to conceptualize what they might be, holding back from us, hiding from us all this time. And with respect to the alien topic, which I think the UFO topic, I think it deserves discussion for sure. But I think it's just been muddled with so much, Disney, Marvel, TV show perceptions of how we think it's going to play out, like the movies and stuff like that, when it should have been more focused on the science and the physics the whole time. What I tell people on that front is I believe aliens are real. Sure. It's a huge universe. I believe the universe is practically infinite, maybe infinite. So of course aliens exist somewhere out there. That's not the problem. Problem is it's really far away. It's really far away. Basically anywhere is really, really, really far away. So that narrows down the possibilities of how aliens could be here hanging out with us. And for me, I say, okay, if the story is the aliens are coming here and they're hanging out with us, I don't care if they're visiting us, abducting us, or we dug something up archaeologically, whatever. Either any of those scenarios, the story isn't the aliens. Although that's interesting, tells us more about our universe. The story is the technology. How did they do that? How did they get here from, let's say, the Andromeda galaxy? Right? Are they AI and they can live forever, or can they just step through a wormhole? Right? Because
So
now
can,
you're like,
can
oh,
I
that
can
will
I,
change
can I
everything.
unpack that
Go,
that a little bit?
please.
All right, like before we like get into the wormhole stuff, and I think it's like kind of on the right track in some sense. But I think that what someone should realize from that situation that you just pointed out, which is that these distances that must be covered are extraordinarily vast, and if we ourselves are going to traverse them at some point in the future, like let's zoom out really, really far here for a second. This star, by all accords, won't live forever that we have here, right? And we don't have a plan to, we don't have, we're not planning on going extinct. Like everything everybody talks about, all of the global warming discussion is all like trying to basically protect us from, killing ourselves off. So at some point, we're going to have to get out of this star system. And going as fast as we can, even if the Earth was to just fly off of its leash right now, it would take tens of thousands of years to get to the next star system. And so that as a goal for how would you traverse large distances, whether it's aliens or not, I'm just saying like from our own perspective, if we want to figure out how to do that, then we have to look into some way that we can disconnect from the photogravitational system that holds us in place with the speed of light being the barrier that makes it such an impossibly difficult voyage. So I think it's like a noble goal, and I think that there's only one real possibility that I can see, which is, like I said, whatever it is that whatever medium photogravitationally conveys information, right? Whatever is holding us to the ground right now, whatever is conveying the electromagnetic radiation, you might call it fields or the ether, whatever you want to call it. You would have to be able to disconnect your body or your spacecraft from that in order to not be restrained by it with known limitations like the speed of light. And so that disconnection gravitationally, which would allow you to, inertiogravitationally disconnect, it would also make you invisible. That's just almost,
Yeah.
that seems, I know that's not definitionally the case, but whenever you look at the history of people trying to make sense of the medium of light and gravity, really up until the 20th century, everyone assumed it to be the same medium, right? There's something there that is conveying all of this. Nobody understands how it works. Obviously, relativity made it so we didn't have to worry about it anymore because we could calculate without a medium. Didn't make it go away. This is something we talk about at length on this show. But they do seem to be directly related. The intensity falls off of the inverse square law. It seems to be some sort of radial force field that is responsible for these interactions. And there must be some shared medium. And if you disconnect from one, then you disconnect from the other. And that makes it really interesting as a technological possibility for me, just looking out onto the future of the landscape. Like, I don't even know if they have this or if that's what this video shows or anything like that. But I do know that if you were going to do it, if you were going to go faster than the speed of light, you would have to somehow disconnect your connections to your immediate surroundings.
Yeah.
And
I think you're underselling the idea that it would axiomatically result in no longer being visible.
yes, that's the key
Yeah.
points I'm at here with this. I'm like, I don't know anything about replicator machines or teleportation or anything like that, and that's harder for me to grok. But the idea of, the way I'm looking at it, the only way an atom can be held to the ground is if it's connected to the ground. It might be, some substructure that we can't. It's not obviously
Mhm.
an atomic uh, chain that's holding it to the ground, but there might be some substructures of the atom that are holding it to the next atom, holding it to the next atom, holding it to the ground. To break free of those in such a way that you could go faster than the known limitation, which is obviously the deformation rate of the medium, right? Like all waves are limited in materials. The speed of light having a limitation really doesn't have a rational explanation other than being the deformation rate of that medium. So if you disconnect from it gravitationally, inertially, then you're also going to be invisible. Like, so if you
Yeah.
do pull off a technology to go outside of the bounds of the speed of light, you will be invisible. I guess that's where my logic has gotten me to with this problem.
That's why it's teleportation in the videos, right? I mean, that's another explanation. The explanation I normally give is, well, E equals MC squared, and the mass of our Boeing 777. I don't want to get sued by Delta, so let me get my MH370 or my Malaysian Airlines one version out. This is a lot of mass. This is a lot of mass. Like you pointed out earlier, like, did they do a test on this? This is a Boeing 777. This is one of the biggest planes in the entire fleet. It can hold 300 people. If they're converting this to energy, I mean, we should have seen the planet get destroyed. I mean, a big part of the planet should have blown up at that point. So, and what we see happens in the blink of an eye. One of those videos is only 6 frames per second. And in that one, we see like one blip, and then there's just nothing there anymore. There's nothing there anymore. And this is why it can't just be simple annihilation. Now, maybe you're saying, okay, well, they're antimatter and they have the perfect amount of antimatter to, counteract the normal matter. Maybe then in that situation, but even then, I feel like we should see more of an energetic release at that point. But what I really want to focus on is you brought up a lot of great points there. First thing people should read is a teleportation physics study by Eric W. Davis. This was being held up by one of the generals of the Air Force Research Labs as the type of research he wanted done in his laboratories in the 2000s. Okay, so 10 years before those videos. And how can this be real? Like you said, is that means there must be some type of medium. We can call it the ether. I like to just call myself a 0 point energy influencer, which is a callback to the idea of the ether. But it means there must be a dielectric medium. It's a dielectric medium that we're interacting with. Actually, Maxwell, like, this is one of Maxwell's assumptions that is kind of thrown in there. This is why you have this displacement current in the equations as well.
It was everybody's assumption. Like,
Yeah,
I'm not going to
everybody's.
belabor it because we've done tons of podcasts. Like, this is a constant subject. And honestly, the last one that just came out, we dwelt on this in depth. But yeah, the fact that relativity got around the ether, even in Einstein's own words, did not discount the necessity of it at the end of the day.
No, not at
So
all.
so there is some sort of medium, I guess, is my main point here. And I'm like, if you want to go faster than the medium will deform, you got to disconnect from it. That means you're not going to be seen anymore. And for me, that's a lot less crazy sound. I mean, in principle, from a rational perspective, there's a lot less steps necessary for me to imagine that than there are to imagine something getting like vaporized into all its little particles and then reassembled replicator style like Star Trek. I'm like, you simply just rip this thing off of the photogravitational grid. It's still there. Maybe it's moving really fast all of a sudden, whatever it is. It could be a single cluster of atoms. It could be a freaking airplane. I mean, I assume the airplane would be harder, but the fundamental principle remains that in the future, if you want to travel to other star systems, you're gonna have to find a way to disconnect from the photogravitational network. If whatever kind of ether thing you want to point to, you got to get disconnected from it to be able to bypass that elasticity.
And what if that photo gravitational network also it provides mass, it provides inertia, and it provides the effect of gravity that we
Definitely,
feel, right?
definitely.
So this would mean that Einstein is right. A lot of people want to say that Einstein's wrong. I think he's wrong about the photon. I think that light is a wave. I think everything is a wave. But I think he's right about gravitational waves, that we are in a elastic solid, essentially. So everything is coupled together and it can move like this. We don't see the elasticity. That's the trick. The trick of the ether is that we don't perceive it. But it is there. There is this bending of space-time. It's almost like if I were to tell you, you're flat. You'd be like, I'm not flat. I can see in 3 dimensions. But I would say, well, from my higher dimensional perspective, you're flat. And that's like the same thing is that how can you teleport? It's like, well, if I'm playing Minecraft on my computer, you wouldn't wonder how I can teleport in Minecraft from over here to over here. Because you'd say, well, this is just an illusion. What's really happening is it's on this computer down over here that's on, a 2 dimensional surface or what have you. It's kind of like that. And that, like to your point, yes, what's happening is in teleportation, at least not yet, we're not deconstructing everything atom by atom and then reconstructing it atom by atom. That's super complicated. No, it's a lot easier than that. You're just breaking free. This is why we have this idea of coupling. Coupling. So if you assume everything's in a solid and everything's actually connected together, then really what's happening here is that you're breaking free, you're decoupling from that 0 point energy, from that ether, from that space time, however you want to think of it. And then the question is, well, what happens when you do that? Well, first of all, yes, you're going to be invisible. In fact, one of the Defense Intelligence reference documents about metamaterials and invisibility cloaking, it says, what's the best form of invisibility? It's literally bend space-time around you. That's the best form of invisibility.
Like
Just like with
lensing.
gravitational lensing. Yes, exactly. And I thought that was funny because I read that and I go, oh, okay, yes. Because to your point, like you're thinking about it conceptually the right way. Because now we're starting to realize that if they were to say something's an advanced form of cloaking, what's the difference between that and like literally bending space-time? Because like, yes, the most advanced form of cloaking or invisibility is bending space-time. And then the last thought
Well, I think
is,
that it would be
okay,
different because it would be disconnected.
Refractive.
It would be disconnection. Like,
Yeah.
I think that we
it's
have
just a
to
matter
take a
of
Yeah,
how
we got.
moment.
many
Let's
electromagnetic
be really
waves are being
careful.
blocked, right?
Let's be really careful with
But
this because I think that
yeah,
it's valuable, and I don't
please.
want to lose anybody thinking that we're like mixing up something. So
Mhm.
I can see there being like a couple of possibilities here.
Please.
One of them is literally just disconnecting from whatever connections exist. And
Mhm.
so I think I'll just build this out really quickly for you, just because
Sure.
I think it's worth people hearing it over and over again. When we talk about atoms, like you don't have to look very far to see how atoms might be connected to each other. So the standard wave equation that you use to describe the shape of atomic orbitals, the electron wave function, it actually doesn't end in a neat little shell like you see in your chemistry books. It actually extends indefinitely. So there's some chance that you'll find the electron, this is one way of putting it, that you could detect the electron at any length from the distance from the nucleus. But I think that it's reasonable to interpret that the surface of the atom is extended in its nature. I tend to think of it as kind of furry on the surface. But the fact that atoms are connected to each other isn't that crazy or controversial. It seems to be the case, and it gives you a natural medium for light and gravity that doesn't have to be this background substance, right? It's just the extended portions of the atoms themselves. So one possibility that's on the table is you find a way to disconnect the atoms of whatever you're trying to accelerate from their inertial gravitational connections. It makes them invisible. That's on one side of the table. On the other side of the table is more standard stuff like lensing possibilities, so refractive differences. If you do have a stabilized plasma orb, you're going to have differences in density. And if you've ever been driving around like in the desert in the Southwest or something, probably San Diego, you've probably seen these little mirages on the road, right? And those are just because the refractive index changes as a result of the density of the different layers of air. So you could certainly imagine a cloaking mechanism that was refractive in nature as well, where you're in some sense distorting the path of light around these objects. So those are two separate like bins from my rational perspective.
I
And
think
maybe
yeah, go ahead.
maybe there's the third, maybe it's a combination of these, maybe it's, something I can't even imagine.
It's funny because I think of them as exactly the same thing. And when I think of like what they're doing in the videos, I think that okay, all the wormhole papers by like Matt Visser basically I think is on the edge of it, showing that you can minimize the energy requirement, the negative energy requirement for a wormhole, which is like how thin can we make our soap bubble? Because we just need to detach ourselves from space-time conceptually. That's what we're pointing out, right? So what he figured out is okay, well then in that case we just need to create a bubble around our area of space-time, and it can be really almost infinitely thin. It just needs to be thin enough there to stay stable for as long as we need it to stay stable for. And we don't necessarily even need it to stay stable that long, just long enough for our object to go from one point to the next, which could be almost no time, theoretically. So the other thing they figured out is that there's something called a polyhedral wormhole. So you can have a flat face wormhole. This also minimizes the energy requirement. I actually don't fully understand why, but something to do with having a grid structure at certain vortices that can minimize the energy requirement. Um, but so I guess what I was going to say on that front is that if you can actually create a wormhole, you can have the minimum amount of energy required to produce it. Then it's just a matter of figuring out, well, what is negative energy? Like, how does that play a role in this? And if we can create, I think, just a plasma bubble that has, has a surface inside of it, then what we're doing when we displace it is now what's going to happen to the light, right? The light is going to bounce off on the outside. And what's going to happen on the inside of this bubble? The light's going to reflect back inward. But now the problem is there's nowhere for it to go. So from a standard bubbles perspective, I would think if this bubble pops, okay, the light's going to escape and shoot out. But if the bubble doesn't pop? What if the bubble implodes? Well, now this would be equivalent to like a magnetic monopole. We're saying this is being like sucked out of our reality, out of an extra dimension. It's going to shoot out somewhere else. Like this is analogous to a black hole or a white hole where something's going to shoot out. That's what I think is potentially happening. So it's almost like you're rerouting the light through the extra dimension. That was the light that was inside the bubble is now being focused through an extra dimension out a different way. So it's still happening. It's just not happening from our outside perspective observing. It looks like it was just sucked through an implosion, and now it's going to appear somewhere else. I don't know. Maybe you tell me from a photon physics perspective if that makes any sense.
And I mean, if I were you, like, look, so like to break this back down, like the space-time thing has been turned into a quasi-medium by the mainstream press, like over the years. But if you really start to ask yourself, like, what is the difference between a material and an idea? Well, and is space-time qualify as a material, or does it qualify as an abstraction? Excuse me. And what you'll find is that space-time inherently involves motion, right? It involves this concept of time, which is really kind of a comparison of a standard motion to some change in position. Or so the problem is when you start treating abstractions like they're material objects, I think it's very easy to get really far down the rabbit hole where you can't picture what's actually happening anymore. So this is like philosophers. Yeah,
I have a good example. I think that will conceptualize this. So one of the things in the UFO community, one of the claims is that when you get inside these UFO craft, they're bigger on the inside than what they look like on the outside. Well, how could that be possible? That means that, again, this is a thing where it's like space-time isn't working the way that we think. Somehow you get inside the craft and it's as big as a football field. That would mean that somehow in the spacecraft they're creating more space-time. Well, that's how we would think of it, right? That's how I'm conceptualizing. My viewpoint is, yes, that's possible. Yes, that's possible because all we think of as space-time is a coupling, and it's a dielectric coupling. So if your shell of your spacecraft can decouple you, now the inside of your craft doesn't even necessarily have to be as big as what it perceives to be on the outside anymore either. And
that
me, yes, thought.
It might be true that the appearance from one perspective would be very different than the appearance from the other if you were in fact decoupled from the photogravitational network. Like, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. All I'm trying to do is make sure that we keep material descriptions of reality rooted in material understandings of reality. And so the physicists are not off the hook on this. A lot of them are very quick to refer to space-time as a material. It's not, though, because you describe material statically, right? So if I want to describe like this table, I can describe it as a lattice of subunits and so forth. But ultimately, I conceive of this table statically. Space-time's not like that, though. It's this amalgamation of positions and frames in the movie in which you've located those positions. It's already an abstraction to begin with. You can't actually like put a coffee cup down on an abstraction. So
I think some people disagree with you though, right? If you look at like the EM drive and I think at warp drive even, right? It's like you can see forces on asymmetrical configurations using space-time. And that means you have to think of it as an actual object now. If you can push against it, even though maybe it's a weak interaction, it's something that we would discount. I mean, I still think you have.
Well, I think that it stands in and has a lot of overlap with some material medium. Like, I think that oftentimes people use that word. I mean, I've noticed you've done it a few times in this conversation where you're subbing in like a material mediator of light and gravity as space-time, and I understand the draw, and I'm tempted to do it myself just to smooth things along. But I think that it can result in a lot of unrealities as well, right? It can result in us being confused about what time itself is. It can result in us being able to sort of shirk like how it is that we would productively go about creating such a drive in the future, such that we could detach from the network that holds us in place at this very moment.
And using something like an EM drive as evidence of there being some kind of space-time manipulation is shaky because the evidence for EM drives is shaky.
Mm, I
It,
don't
it-
think so. If you look at Charles Bueller's recent work, I mean, I think they've done over 3,000 experiments and vacuum drives. I mean, for the
I know,
original
but
EM drive,
we also know that science is full of fraud, and there's enormous. And I look, I think that it's
okay.
so important to like bin these things along a continuum of like I see a two-axis graph. One is like fraud versus reality, and the other one is like science versus magic in some ways,
Mm,
where I'm like there's a collection of things that live in the space of fraud and magic. There's a collection of things that live in the space of fraud based on real science, and then there's like perhaps real science based on magic, and there's real stuff that's based on science. But my point is that if we treat the substance of the universe as being mathematical and immaterial, then we can come up with all kinds of hypothetical magical technologies that somebody in a laboratory can run tests that demonstrate its potential use.
mm,
And the history of science is littered with people that do exactly that. They do stuff that doesn't actually hold up to true hard scrutiny
Development,
or development. Yeah, it's like if somebody comes up with
implementation.
absolutely. And so I would say that we still live on the threshold of the next age of technology. Like there's a lot of really crazy magical stuff. There's weird things that we're seeing, and there's I think that it's possible to attribute the things that people are seeing to either fraud or manipulation because there's a tremendous amount of incentives for that. Right. And
mm.
so we can treat the video as being potentially real, but we can also treat it as being yet another piece of perpetuated fraud. And so we can encapsulate that and we can say, okay, it might be. However, the likelihood that there are technologies that are beyond our wildest imagination that could be implemented does seem plausible. And so our task is then to say, if we maintain in our minds the possibility that this is fraudulent to some degree, then we are tasked with the question of, okay, but it's pointing at something that could very well be real. How do we parameterize that in a way that accelerates our ability to reach the point where it does become real? And how do we understand it?
No, it's definitely real. But I get where you're coming from on that front. And so this is what I would say is EM Drive was tested by Sonny White of NASA. Tested anomalous thrust. There's the counter papers for it. I don't see the counter paper. What there was a debunking. There was an excuse. The excuse for the thrust that was detected by NASA was, oh, it was a temperature thing or something. Well, they're not the only ones that tested it. Multiple people have. And like I said before, Charles Bueller, check him out. He just did an interview with Sonny White, was actually literally going over this exact topic of how space-time is not empty. It's not empty. And we can get thrust, forces from it. We just have to do the calculations. We have to unify gravity and electromagnetism. And if we do that, boom, we can get it. And those videos are going to be proven real because this science is going to be proven real. I mean, this is the cutting edge of it. Whether you believe it or not, I'm not going to force you to. It's not really my prerogative to force you to. Like you said, the point of this is to try to push us forward to a point where we, from the public perspective, can get this technology to us, which admittedly, we're pretty far away, even if I'm right. So, what I would say then is this to demystify it and get it back to its origin of this, to what this is all about. This is the question I would pose for you guys and really everybody's. What is electricity and where does electricity come from?
Hell yeah, that's our favorite subject. I mean, I don't think that it can be rationalized from a physics perspective as anything other than what atoms are doing to each other, because they're our fundamental physical subunit of material reality. And so it obviously involves the outer surface of the atom, which is the electron. You know, the chemists all treat the outer surface as the electron. So obviously the electron, the outer surface of the atom, is in some sort of motion, which is conveyed to the atoms next to it in various ways. I mean, there's absolutely there's even motions you can assign to the outer surface of the atom that would solve the problem in every condition for what electricity is. It's certainly not magic, I guess. If even if you don't like the particular solutions that I could lay on the table for you, it certainly doesn't need to be magic. Let's put it that way.
Mm. I feel like it definitely is magic. I mean, if I look at it, here's how I would explain electricity. I would say electricity is a dipole where you rip an
What's a
electric charge
dipole? Like you
two
already have
opposite.
It's already an
charges. You already
abstraction,
have
right?
So I have
electricity
something that's
inside
in
of that.
equilibrium, right? So think of it like a guitar string. I have a guitar string, and on one side I have one direction, and if I let that go, it's going to reverberate in
What is
multiple
that?
directions.
What is that though? Like what materials? What's the guitar string here?
Mm.
Because I'm saying it's the surface of the atom. That's all I'm saying. It's nothing crazy. It's just like the atom
I'm not.
the atom has it's a thing. It's a material body. It has inward extension. It's made out of some sort of subunits because it changes shape all the time. I'm saying that surface is doing an action and it's conveying it to the atom next to it, whether it's grinding up against it or whether it's that rarefied, hairy, filamentary projection from the surface. Like they're interacting with each other. And you have to have a material that's the actor in your story in a material, rational understanding of reality.
Why?
Well, because you're not doing physics otherwise. You're doing
Can't
something
everything
else.
just be energy though? E equals mc squared. Why does everything have to be a material? Why does
Because
everything have to
energy
be
is
a
not a
physical?
thing. Energy is a property.
It's a process too, right? It involves motion to begin with. So it's like, the table doesn't have motion to be conceived. You just draw a picture of it. But in order to conceive of a process, you have to have motion. And energy is fundamentally just a conversion for how you get a certain amount of motion from a certain amount of material.
So do you believe that you can make a Bose-Einstein condensate then out of matter?
I couldn't make one. I think that the matter has a
Like matter
tremendous
can be
amount of
bosonic?
I think that the matter, like atoms, have a tremendous amount of motion internally that can be released into the network and can be used productively and can result in all sorts of strange appearances in the network. Like I think that there's the problem with a lot of this stuff is that it's reverse engineered from the detectors. So you'll basically right. So all of these stand-ins, like the word mass, the word energy, the word uh, all these parameters, electromagnetic parameters, they all stand in for some metric that's read out of your device, right? Your job as a philosopher or a scientist of the future is to give form to what's actually happening. And if you want to be a physics philosopher, if you want to be someone who actually talks about material reality, you damn well better give it material form. Otherwise, what are you doing? You can't start like midway through the explanation. It's just like an irrational number that never terminates. It doesn't have any bead that we can hold on to. Like, I mean, I'm really fascinated by things like telepathy and stuff too. We've had Diane Hennessy Powell out to our house, and like this stuff fascinates me. But at the end of the day, I'm like, the rubber has to meet the road. Like, you have to actually infect physical reality with something physical at the end of the day, and that might be a photogravitational interaction. It might be something, but it's not just straight up magic. Otherwise, what are we doing? Like, we're not doing physics.
Well, I don't know. I can't disagree with anything you said. I just disagree with your interpretation. I think that it is magic. At the end of the day, it is infinite. I think that it is a sea of energy that's in an equilibrium, and all you're doing is pulling it out of equilibrium.
I don't
You pull
disagree
it
with
out of
that at
equilibrium.
all. Like, I just disagree with the fact that it's magic. Like, magic to me means not comprehensible.
Oh,
Comprehensible?
well, I think
Incomprehensible.
magic's just science we haven't understood yet. So
Okay.
for us, it's magical now. For
Okay.
people in 1,000 years, it won't be magical. I think they'll
Mm.
look at these conversations like we would look at somebody from 100 years ago trying to understand electromagnetism for the first time. Or, I mean, I'm trying
100%.
to imagine how like this
100%.
cell phone works, right? I mean, like, could we really have imagined like wireless voice communication over thousands of miles? 100 years ago when we were riding around on horses.
But I do
So
think that it's worth pointing out that if you read the literature from 100 years ago where they're trying to figure out electricity, like they're trying to figure it out. They're not like this stuff is magical and weird. They're like maybe it's a fluid, maybe it's a vortex, maybe it's something that's happening in the space between the atoms. So there's
And
maybe
eventually they're just like, hell with it. It's equations.
it's forces, but the project was always to understand. And I
But
think that that's the spirit of inquiry and philosophy. It's like to point at something and be like, that seems like magic, but it's not, and we're gonna figure out what what it is.
well, just to let me first say that if you were to talk about most of Tesla's ideas, Tesla would have definitely been considered a crackpot. Unlimited free energy, wireless energy. Elon Musk is still railing about. I think General Quast was on with Sean Ryan, and Elon Musk is going, "This wireless energy is not possible. This is magic, right? It's not possible." So even stuff that Tesla was talking about then was still considered to be magic to us now. But in the context of the ether of there being an extra dimension, it no longer becomes magic and now becomes a scientific possibility. So you can't just say like, "Oh, we're going to dismiss this stuff as magic." Again, it does come back down to discernment and like, yes, there are people taking advantage, there's people making stuff up, but there is things that are beyond our current classical understanding. And where I would say I disagree on the interpretation is, and maybe yours or other people's, is that I don't think we have to think of everything as a physical object. I think we can think of what we look at as our perception. I think Einstein's the one that showed us this with general relativity, with time dilation, because these are things that seem magical. How can time dilation be possible? How can I have a twin and then my twin goes somewhere else and comes back, and now my twin's a different age than me?
But
That
that
seems like magic to me, right? But that's also physical reality.
I
well,
mean,
it's
that
not. It's hold on. I think that it's really important to point out that
Go
it's
ahead.
not physical reality, because physical reality is actually sending somebody out and then having
Mhm.
them come back 50 years later and be a different age than their twin.
Okay.
We've never that's not a thing that we have observed. This is a
Well, no,
theoretical.
no, no. We tested it with atomic clocks. It doesn't have to be 50 years, but we tested atomic clocks and they got out of sync. That proves time dilation,
but the
right?
clocks
It's been
are
proven for a long time.
Well, the
well, the
clocks are
clock. That's
gravitational.
the thing. The word time in these equations actually means what clocks measure. And so the fact that like when you have a clock that's being tugged on by a lot of atoms around it, in other words, it's in a gravitational field,
Mhm.
it should go slower. Like it's being pressured physically. Like I said, if the atoms are attached to each other and you're closer to a bunch of other atoms, you're more attached, i.e., it's going to be harder for you to pulsate.
Yeah, like think about what is an atomic clock? It's counting cycles of some cesium or rubidium atom per second. It's like it makes this number of pulses per second. That is a second. All atoms at the same gravitational potential will pulse the same number of times. And then you take it up into orbit and you measure it again and you're like, holy shit, it goes faster. Time is running faster. And you're like, well, hold on a second. The thing that you're measuring is you're measuring the pulsations of the atom. So the only thing that you have shown is that an atom, when not in a gravitational field, that is in a weaker gravitational field, will pulsate faster. Is that time running faster?
I
For
like
all
to say,
intents and
like, I
purposes,
like to tell my
yes.
students,
That's
like,
the point.
if
Yes.
you take a pendulum clock up into outer space, it'll show you that time stopped completely. Like the clocks are instrumental to the definition of time in the fundamental GR equations. And so, of course, and this all comes down to synchronizing these light clocks and stuff, but
Mhm.
of course, the atoms are going to be affected. They're going to behave differently depending on their local connective landscape. I just think that I think that this idea of connectivity is crucial to explaining. Like again, if these videos are real, it's going to be critical to explaining what's happening here. And even if they're not real, it's going to be critical to us getting to other star systems in the future. And I think that confusing clocks for time is not going to help us get to the next star system.
Okay, well, I mean, I think time dilations. I mean, we can argue time dilation or not. I think either way, we're saying that the effect is real, the measurements and real. Your interpretation may be slightly different if you want.
But the
Um,
interpretation is what matters, right?
yeah,
It's like
that's fine.
so you see that's kind of that's the crazy thing about science. I've been reading. Do you
Mhm.
know who Thor Heyerdahl is?
Mm.
He was a Norwegian adventurer, and Thor Heyerdahl went to Polynesia on a boat of his own construction. So he basically decided that he was fascinated by Polynesian culture and the Polynesian islands as being this strange place to have found humans in the first place. Like, how did people get there? And so, hold on one second. We always laugh when people have to leave because we're like, what if he just doesn't come back?
Oh, I just had to open the door for my dog. So
It's all right. Hold on, let me make a note. So he goes to Polynesia and he's living on this island called Fatuhiva, and he's spending a lot of time with islanders that have not yet been exposed to the modernity in any real sense. Like there's some schooners that come and bring supplies, but one of the problems on the island is disease. And so there's like elephantiasis, there's malaria, there's sepsis during childbirth, there's they have a lot of cavities because they're getting a lot of flour and refined sugar in these shipments. And he's like watching the way that they construct explanations for the things that they're watching these things happen to them, right? They know that they have elephantiasis. They know that they're sick. And so they've made this observation, but the conclusion that they draw from it is that they've offended the gods. They've broken some taboo. They've done something in the jungle that is bad, and so they're being punished for it. And I'm like, that's the seed of empiricism and science. It's being able to see something and being like, okay, well, what actually caused this? And arriving at the conclusion that there's something material that causes illness leaves you to the next level of saying, okay, well, we should be more hygienic with the water that we drink in order to prevent this disease from spreading. But as long as you're like, well, the gods did it to us, then you never get to the point where you can actually fix it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, ultimately, I think the idea of materialism and everything being a particle and what have you definitely makes us feel good, right? It makes us understand and be able to relate to our reality. Because when I touch this cup, my hand doesn't go through the cup, right? Like, but we're being told that on the atomic scales, this is mostly just empty. So the reason why my hand doesn't go through the cup is because, well, these are fermions and these are repelling the electrons in the cup, and this is the reason why my hand doesn't go through it. But if you really boil it down to quantum mechanics, it does get a lot more confusing. It does get a lot more immaterial. So that's the only
Well,
reason
the
why
interpretations are lacking at those
definitely.
right. So
And
it's
that's
like,
why we don't have a unification theory, right? Because we don't have an interpretation that everybody can agree on. And honestly, I don't think we're going to get to one anytime soon. And I think that they've already got unification theories that are good enough that we can engineer things, engineer magic, engineer plasma orbs and teleportation. But from a perspective of academia and physics and the public, we're not all going to agree on the same interpretation of it. Just like we were just pointing out now on, things like time dilation. And I have no problem with that too. I think that should be what our goal, especially as podcasters, science influencers, whatever. We should be the ones pushing those ideas and challenging them, which is why I like what you did there. So another experiment that I would push out there, because I think that the best thing to do is like, oh, well, what are experimental results that we see? And how do we then interpret them and fit them into our models? One that I really like is the Casimir effect, but specifically the dynamic Casimir effect. Casimir effect, for people who don't know, take two plates, conductive surfaces, put them close together. They squeeze out. So at least one interpretation is they're squeezing out certain wavelengths of 0 point energy of virtual photons, and they're squeezing them out. So because they squeeze them out, there's pressure that pushes the plates together. And you would say, well, in an empty vacuum, this shouldn't be the case. In an empty vacuum, I should just be able to put two plates together and they're not going to pull together, right? That's not on a macroscopic level, but they do happen. And this force gets exponentially more powerful the closer these things get. So when they make microchips, they have to be careful about metal surfaces coming close to one another because of this effect where they'll just come and stick together and then you can't get them apart anymore. The dynamic Casimir effect took this, and I think they made a cylinder, maybe. Can't remember exactly what they did, but I think they just changed the geometry of it. But essentially, the dynamic Casimir effect shows they can pull photons. They can actually pull real light out of the vacuum, create real photons from nothing, from question mark. Where's that coming from? So, like, one of my favorite clips to post is of Leonard Susskind, who's an astrophysicist who's really pioneered wormhole theory and ER equals EPR theory. And he's asked directly because he says space time is electromagnetic. And people go, well, how? There's nothing there, right? There's nothing physically there. So, there's the virtual photons are there, but what are those? You said there's no mass. So, if there's no mass, where's the electromagnetism in space time coming from? And this is where you can't, this is where the standard classical physics really just breaks down, right? They just say, well, we know it's there because quantum mechanics requires it to be there, so, but at the same time, there's no mass, there's nothing physical there. So, how is that actually happening? This is why we evoke the idea of the ether. The idea of the ether would say there is something there. We're in a medium, we're coupled to that medium all the time, and that these plates are interacting with the medium when we're doing that. And then if we manipulate them in the right way, we can actually make light, real energy, photons, come pull straight out of the ether. to me, that's magical from our current perspective. I would call that free energy. Um, just colloquially, ugh, I can't say that word right. But yeah.
Dude, I absolutely think that there is a way to access phenomenon that we see inklings of that is happening in between atoms, and weird
Mhm.
stuff does happen, right? There's the positron electron pairings, and there's all sorts of bizarre stuff. The Casimir effect's interesting, although it's pretty weak, like energetically, and we could talk about how in the world you would go about harnessing that. But my point is that in order to get to an understanding of that, first of all, we can't keep pretending like there isn't a medium and that the equations of relativity have somehow absolved us of addressing that. I think it's a really, really huge problem for physics in general. No, but like the ether was not disproved. They just misconceived of it. Whatever this plum pudding thingy that stuff was supposed to be floating in didn't work out. And absolutely, like you also pointed out something really astute too, man, which is you don't need to understand stuff at a material level to be able to manipulate it. You just need equations of how the environment's going to be influenced, how those detectors work. You parameterize it, you tweak it, right? You really need a empirical understanding of reality. Like if I turn up this voltage, how will this component change, or what? How will you need these very observationally consistent ways of describing reality, and math is fantastic for that, but it doesn't absolve you of the interpretive physical question of what are we actually probing? What is the structure of this substance? And so that's the reason I've been banging on about like why space time is a little bit of a cop out for me, because it doesn't get at the underlying structured question. What is the actual arrangements of the extended surface of these atoms in such a way, and how can we use that understanding in the future perhaps to manipulate it to great ends, whether it's energy, whether it's travel, whether it's cloaking. I don't know if you can think of a good reason to cloak something. That seems like that's always for the bad guys, but it just seems like this is not an incompatible. I'm not saying we need a new physics or anything. I'm just like, look, these are open-ended questions that a lot of people, including incredibly brilliant people, seem to think don't matter. They're like, hey, our equations work, relativity is great. I agree. It's all very predictive. It's fantastic description of what's happening. I can have a fantastic wiring diagram for how this computer works and not know a damn thing about the atoms inside of it. But if I really want to like start from scratch and go beyond a simple computer and do something incredible, I probably should understand what the atoms are doing. And you talk to guys, like we have friends in Silicon Valley who are building new next level of hardware. They absolutely do think about what the atoms are doing, right? And so you can't just sideline the material question of what your space time is mapping. It's a map. What is it mapping? That's a really important question for the future of science, for the next generation physicists. It's something we need to get back to, and it's something I'm obviously really passionate about. And I don't think that it in any way detracts from what you're talking about here. It's just a slightly different framing of it. So I
And
just don't
yeah.
want you to think that I'm in
No,
any
I
way
like this back and
stepping
forth.
on your feet with this.
No, especially because and I think there's a lot of it's about how do you interpret it, and what's the conceptual viewpoint, and how does it fit within the math and the framework of the standard model at the moment. And we can't actually even solve things like fusion until we understand these base level things. That's probably why we've struggled for so long, right? Is that until we understand the base level of like how does reality work? I mean, how can we figure out something as complicated as fusion? And so I think you're
It
right.
can't
Which
hurt.
seems pretty far down in the stack of complicated things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it
Do
should
you
be
know
one
what
of
I
the
mean?
first things we figure out. I mean, it's like the basis of like atoms, and so I think
Yeah,
that even
that's
in
all I'm
even
saying.
in my viewpoint, where I think like everything's like waves, like point source understanding or a particle like understanding is essential because we do live in a reality where we are experiencing our reality like that, and
It
that's
just has to
how.
be waves of something. And
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
all.
I
That's all.
looked at that dynamic Casimir effect
Yeah.
experiment just now, and it's really interesting. So, what they did is they took a cavity and they oscillated it magnetically at gigahertz speeds. And then out of the cavity, they got microwave photons. And they're like, holy shit, something crazy is happening here. And I'm like, but you shook the atoms inside the cavity at microwave frequencies, granted in the magnetic domain, but then you get electromagnetic radiation out of it that's in the same domain as what you stimulated it as. And so I'm like, if you start to think about that in the sense of, oh wow, that's like a that's like a photomagnetic effect.
Mhm.
What is that actually telling us about the nature of magnetism and electricity and light and how they relate to one another? You might actually be able to get to the next step of understanding what is a photon, what is magnetism, what is happening inside the cavity. But as long as you're like, it's just some weird thing that pops out and it's so strange and magical, and like, we can't make it to the next level, and the next level demands a different metaphysics. Like, I talk about this all the time.
Mhm.
Well, by the way, my buddy who I was mentioning earlier, who's at Palantir now, like he, he was in the physics department when I was doing my PhD. Like I would have this very similar conversation with him all the time. I'm like, dude, like we need to understand the substructure of these interactions. And at the end of the day, every day we would go home from the lab, he would be like, nah, man, like the equations, the fields, it's fine with me. Like it works. He would always say that. It works. I'm like, yeah, it works to a point. Like, how are we going to get past what we consider, right? How are we going to get past being those islanders looking at these magical cell phone bricks to realizing that, oh, these are actually electromagnetic devices that are manipulating electromagnetic waves? And how are we going to get to that level from wherever we're at if we just are satisfied with these kind of gross descriptions of reality? As quantitatively accurate as they might be, they're clearly limited, right? That this seems like I mean, if you just want to point at fusion, like, hey, clearly something in the universe is making all these elements.
Yeah.
So fusion is possible. Why are we not pulling it off, right? Maybe we're missing some important frame for understanding physical reality. That's all I'm saying. Like,
Bring the ether back, guys. I have a good clip I'll send you guys that you can play here that actually shows that all you have to do with the Michelson-Morley experiment is, I mean, if you spin it horizontally, you'll see no fringe shift in the interference pattern, which is what you would expect that there's some magical ether. All you have to do is flip it vertically. You flip it vertically, and then now exactly correlated with the plane of the Earth, you'll see the interference patterns shift one way or another depending on the movement of the experiment, which would then connect the ether to gravity. Because why? Because gravity changes depending on the height from the surface of the Earth. And I think there's some other ether experiments.
There was a lot of work right around
Yeah.
that same period of time at the turn of the 20th century. There was a lot of, I mean, a lot of different studies coming out claiming to have done bit variations on that interferometer and seen different results.
And I think Morley himself in the 30s built a much larger version of it, and he redid the experiments and
I think
came
that
up with a positive result.
it seems to me that the reason they actually abandoned it was because they couldn't actually come up with a material representation for this polarizable substance.
I
That's the
think that it
problem,
was
right?
more yes, it is a
Okay,
problem.
but it doesn't that connect to what we just said? Is like if it doesn't have a material explanation that we can feel, then we just say, okay, screw it, right? And that's kind of what we did. We said, okay, we're getting rid of it. We don't need it. We're just going to say space time's empty, but still, we're going to say there's gravitational waves. Gravitational waves and what? Well, we're not going to worry about that, right? And this is the problem. We kind of threw it away because we it's not really a physical thing, and that's the problem. Is it's like some people call it the quantum gravity or whatever you want to call it. It's not this fluid substance that we can easily measure. It's more
It's not that
abstract than that.
simple. It's
It's
not
not that
that
simple.
simple.
And that's the
I
thing when you
do
talk about
think
extra
that we can
dimensions.
solve it.
Yeah, yeah, well, and that's the thing. We can solve it.
I
I
think we
actually
can
found
solve it.
like optical vortices. That's what you should look into if you want to look into people trying to solve the ether. Because it's this idea of like if you saw a pattern on a flat surface, could you like reverse engineer its three-dimensional shape from its flat surface? That's the same idea as what they're trying to figure out, like how we might kind of create coincidence entanglement like at will. Like if I create a vortex here perfectly, can it shoot through the ether and cause something to happen over here? And can I control where that happens? Because again, if there's this extra dimension, even if I can't see it, even if I can't really perceive it, maybe I can find out a way to interact with it. And they call this solving Schrodinger's equation. Solving Schrodinger's equations to figure this out. I actually don't even fully understand it yet. I just understand the conceptual viewpoint of it. But
I mean,
if you could,
I think a much more like obvious household understanding of this would be transformers. Like you have two coils of wire, they're affecting each other, they're not touching, right? And so they clearly are touching. The question is, it's not the obvious atomic boundaries that you're comfortable with in the chemistry textbook. You can put your hand in between it. It's still, well, depending on the strength of the transformer, you could put something in between it, right? So there's something more complicated. The structure, the subunits of this medium, of the atoms themselves, probably is not really even something people think about, unfortunately. But I think that it holds a great deal of promise to the future of physics. And so that's just like a mission that I'm on, is I really feel like we need to give form to these equations, right? I don't have a problem with the relativistic stuff. I'm just like, what is it pointing at? I don't have a problem with electromagnetic fields, but a field is a map. It's a map of influence. It's a map of effects. And so the question still remains, if we want to move into that next universe of technological power, that really might make all of our lives a lot better. At least one day get our descendants off this planet. We probably ought to start thinking about what those maps are mapping, right?
Yeah. And I think that, I'm not necessarily the expert on figuring that part out, but I can push you in the right direction because when I started digging into fusion, one person I found was Charles Chase of Lockheed Martin. And he's significant because you guys should definitely look in his Lockheed Martin's compact fusion reactor. I was looking in their fusion reactor because I'm figuring out these orbs are like possibly just fusion reactors flying around in the sky. And sure enough, Lockheed Martin had been working on one in their 2010s. They were bragging about it. In fact, they were bragging about their beta value. Well, I think Larry Forsley spoke to you guys about the beta values. The beta values of like tokamak stuff like that, I think are zero point 0.5 to zero point 0.1, which is or 0.05 to zero point 0.1, which is like 5 or 10%. And they're bragging about beta values of 90 to 100% to almost 1. So like magnitudes higher. So and it turns out if you look at the equations that the beta value is like the most important thing. I think it's like beta squared or something is one of the equations for I don't know, power or whatever. Not sure exactly, but you guys can check
Remind me
that.
what a beta value is.
It's the factor of how much the magnetic field strength can compress the plasma, I believe. So, like when you're talking about confinement of your plasma, the beta value is essentially you can think of it as like your magnetic field confinement capability. So, if you can imagine going from like 10% to somewhere near 100% beta value, the idea would be like your beta value is so strong that you can have your magnetic fields are like completely confining the plasma and closed, like a closed magnetic field. So all of a sudden Lockheed Martin's bragging about their magnetic bottle compact fusion reactor and how quickly they can build them, how they can use them for propulsion, unlimited range. Like literally, they're literally bragging about how it'd be unlimited fuel for a craft. And then it went dark in 2018. So then, tangentially, I'm looking at this guy Charles Chase because he's got a patent by Lockheed Martin called coherent matter wave beam, and that's why I asked you the question before: is can matter become a boson? Because this patent says it can, and I'm sitting here going, okay, well, can a plane become a boson and then teleport like a light beam could? Like that's what I'm like one of the theories of how you might be able to teleport an airplane, right? And that had always been in the back of my mind. So I'm seeing these presentations by this guy Charles Chase. Just know he's a Lockheed Martin engineer and I was looking up the compact fusion reactor, and there's Charles Chase presenting it like a TED talk. And so I find his resume on his new website because he left Lockheed Martin also in 2018, coincidentally. And he's saying that he's not just somebody that worked on, he wasn't just doing speaking for the compact fusion reactor. He's literally the guy that convinced the CXOs to invest and to do the compact fusion reactor. He's the guy that put the team together, that did everything related to it. And it turns out he's like a Lockheed Martin fellow, top 0.1% of all Lockheed Martin engineers at the Skunk Works. So he's got all the right credentials. He knew Ben Rich. He worked with Ben Rich on the F-117 Nighthawk back in the 80s too. So this guy, the reason why I bring him up, he's this fusion reactor went dark. Clearly it was successful. It says in his resume that it was successful and it's breathing on its own, but the project's gone dark. Why? Well, if they've got balls of plasma that can fly around, unlimited energy, they've solved fusion. And he has a conference he does called like the APE. Is it Alternate Propulsion and Energy Conference? Eric W. Davis was in attendance. I don't think Larry Forsley necessarily, but the one that was on the internet during COVID, I think it was like the third or fourth one, 2022. He's got Sonny White of NASA on there, the same one that tested the EM drive I was just mentioning. And Sonny White's talking about warp bubbles in his free energy microchip that he was just on Joe Rogan with several months ago, showing off to Joe Rogan about how we're going to make this microchip and now your phone's never going to run out of energy. And so there's Sonny White on this conference presenting with Charles Chase, and there I find Garrett Modell as well. Garrett Modell, he's got a patent for his own version of a free energy microchip that he's been working on for like 15, 20 years with Bernard Haish, also of Lockheed Martin. And so I'm finding all these guys that like I was investigating myself because I'm just looking into free energy type devices, and there's two of them featured on this conference. And what's crazy is there's a third guy also, Paul Thibodeau, who I didn't know about at the time, but his paper got like a lot of scrutiny back in like 2020, I think, because he basically found like the Brownian motion. I can harvest the, thermal, Brownian motion and turn it into electrical energy, which would just be, basically like just pulling energy out of the ambient heat fluctuations pretty much. So the reason why I brought this up in relation to the topic was that even when you listen to these guys' presentations, and I listen to all of them, it's like they get all the same questions about like how though is this real, right? Like how is this actually possible? Okay, you made an asymmetry, but like isn't this free energy now? Aren't you violating the laws of thermodynamics? Like how do you actually explain this in a way that I can physically understand? And usually it all breaks down like you just said. Is like look, the math is there, it says it works. It works when we test it, and we build these prototypes. What else do you want from me? Like that's usually kind of where it gets to. So you're right, there is definitely this problem where okay, well, even if we build it, even if we make it work, how do we explain it? How do we explain it in the context of the physics that we're teaching people now in a way that we can all agree to as well? So
Well,
these are just
there's
more
two
problems.
possibilities, right? It's like one is it's already been built, and you're right. Like we discover an effect, we manipulate it, we what would you say? We maximize its efficiency,
Instrumentalize it.
we maximally instrumentalize it, right? Like that's one possibility. The other possibility is we don't know how to do it, and that we're probably not going to be able to figure it out if we don't have some clues about its inner mechanical workings.
Because I don't think that you can take any of this at face value. Like, if you assume that every single country has a limited number of resources, both in human hours spent working on a problem and in terms of just the number of funds that they can apply to it, then every single country has in their best interest that they get every other country in the world working on the wrong track of things so that they can be the first ones to develop a specific type of technology that they're on track of, but they're presenting it in ways that are misleading or incorrect. Like, it seems impossible to me to assume that anything that is being told to us by somebody who is an agent of the government is in any way, shape, or form a true reflection of what's happening. Like, it almost has to be considered as being intentionally misleading
At least
because
potentially.
I think that it's the simplest possible explanation is that because these people aren't being censured, they're not being thrown in jail for being whistleblowers. They're basically speaking with the sanction of the US government. The US government has a deep intelligence machine that's focused on disinformation to other countries. And this is the most direct and obvious way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I really don't like the whole narrative. Oh, like the people say this about Salvatore Pais's patents too, the UFO patents. They go, oh, this is just disinformation for to confuse other countries. Like, doesn't really work that way. Like, he did real research, and those are his real opinions and thoughts. The other thing too
Look,
is a
we
lot of people
interviewed
are
Sal
speaking.
Pais, and
Mhm.
that was one of the weirdest interviews of any scientist that we've ever done in 360 interviews.
Why
Like,
is that?
because Sal doesn't present his ideas the way that a scientist or a technologist presents his ideas. He presents his ideas as a booster. Like,
Mm.
there's something in the way that he speaks where I'm like, it, you can just call it a gut feeling.
He had a little stuffed animal of a devil over his head the entire time. It was like super creepy. I don't know. He just like Nastia says, like we work for decades with scientists. Like we know how scientists move, and
And
he
talk and breathe and parse their ideas. And
Mm.
even we've talked to a lot of people on the fringe. We've crossed the entire gamut of people that are working really hard on ideas. And in 3 hours of talking to somebody, you can get the feeling whether or not this is an idea that they generated de novo, or if this is an idea that is somehow like either been fed to them or they're just representing the idea without being the originator of it.
Yeah,
And
no, I mean, and I get what you guys are getting at with Sal for sure. But so look at it from this perspective. What if just, and this is hypothetical, I don't know this for a fact. What if Sal works on nukes for the government? right? So there's a lot of aspects he like literally can't say. In fact, he's probably afraid to, because if he says the wrong thing in an interview, like what you just said before about people are saying what they're sanctioned to say. That's actually not what's happening in those cases. Like Sonny White is now independent. So NASA doesn't have any say over what he says now at that point, unless it was related to his work with NASA, et cetera. For Sal, he's an active Navy engineer with the Navy as well, which means that what he says when he does podcasts has to be his own public opinions, and that's why he does his disclaimer at the beginning. So because if he says something incorrectly, like there are real legal issues that will come down in a major way on him. But for Sal, in terms of where his ideas come from, I mean, you're right. He says, and he repeats repeatedly, these are my own ideas, my own thoughts. Like, I didn't get these from anywhere else, but obviously that's not completely true. Obviously, like, all of physics is about building on other people's ideas. So clearly he has seen or been exposed to something that led him to realize that that was real. Because you look at those patents, I mean, it's like, compact magneto inertial confusion reactors. I mean, we're talking about gravitational wave manipulation. All this science is real stuff. And I've found all the people that have been working on this. It's like Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis, the whole crew of guys, same physics. And so I've asked him straight up. So what's his answer? Let me contextualize it for you. He said this is fine. I can put up, say publicly. Like Hal Puthoff and those guys screwed him over. Like he wanted to get a team together to do research on those things, but they've already figured it out. So they're not going to let somebody else go and do it unless it's been sanctioned by the powers that be. So they're the ones that essentially cockblocked him, for lack of a better word, and prevented. I think it was Jay Stratton specifically. I think he told me that, but they're all buddies. And so that's why he's all, super hurt about all this. And so there's all this, almost like middle school drama that happens behind the scenes about it. And end of the day, I don't know what's right or wrong about this because this all does kind of go back to nukes. I mean, when we're talking about fusion, we're talking about nuclear power. We're talking about nuclear weapons.
But don't you think that it's weird to have people working on black projects talking to the press? Like during the Manhattan Project, no one spoke to the press.
Oh, they aren't. The people that are really working on the black projects, so that's why Sonny White's not actively working on a black project. Those people are doing the microchips and stuff like that. The way I look at it, they're being allowed to say that stuff. Like Sonny White going on Joe Rogan. Yeah, you're right. So to a degree, yes, they are controlling it. And in fact, I just was talking to a special operator that was, I think he was SEAL Team 6. I don't know that for a fact, but definitely a SEAL. And, I was on this podcast talking to him. He's going, and the thing that creeped me out, I'm not going to say right now because the podcast hasn't dropped yet, but it'll drop soon. So, but what I want to say is that, and you guys will see it when it comes up. The thing that spooked me the most was I was like,
You talking to Jocko?
No. You guys will find out. So I was saying, why? I was like, why are they allowing me to do this? Right? People ask me because, you could say something about me if if those videos are real. Like, wouldn't they have shut you down by now? Right? And I kind of wonder. I haven't been overtly threatened or anything like that.
Frank Olsen you out of a window somewhere.
Yeah, I haven't fallen down an elevator shaft or whatever. But I am surprised I haven't got like a phone call where someone was like, "Dude, stop." And so I said this to the SEAL, and he was like, "You're part of disclosure right now. Like the fact that this is being revealed you could argue this is being used to scare our enemies. Like that if we actually have this kind of technology, like you better come to the table, Russia or China, because we can like orb you with magical technology that there's no way you're going to be able to have a countermeasure for that, right?"
And that's
what spooked me.
exactly what I'm trying to say, right?
Oh. But yes, could they also be pushing BS? But that's not really how science works, right? You don't really push fake science out, but they have done it. They have done it. Don't get me wrong. They have done it before, yes. But end of the day, if something works, it's going to work. And if you're going to test it, you're going to find it works. And this is what I would say about the people like Paul Thibodeau and Sonny White and Garrett Modell. They have the experimental data to backs it up. Like Garrett Modell, it blows me away. In one of his presentations, you can see it's producing a voltage from nothing in one of the experiments. And they've done all the things to check for the artifacts and different things that it could be. Media won't talk about it. They just don't talk about it, right? And so this is the thing, because I want to say there's a counterpoint to what you were saying before about, yes, there's a lot of grifters who are like trying to make money off of fraud, but actually most of the time it works in the reverse. The people that are really working on the dope, free energy, plasma technologies, they get no funding. They actually don't get the benefit. And Paul Thibodeau mentions this in his presentation with Charles Chase. He says, you know what's weird? When I was doing just the normie physics stuff, I was getting all the National Science Foundation grants, everything. He's like, the moment I started going into these, like, what looks like a free energy thermal, microchip thing, he's like, now nobody wants to talk to me. Nobody wants to give me the grants anymore, et cetera, et cetera. It actually kind of works in the opposite direction because it goes against the conventional understanding of the laws of physics. Once you are, and then he also said, I have to be careful about how I word things because if you word it in a way that allows the patent office to think that you're breaking the laws of physics, then they'll reject it. This is the craziest thing to me. Engineers, like literally, people who are patenting stuff have to literally think about the words they use when they're writing it down because they know the patent office is going to scrutinize based on a classical understanding of physics.
That's all they can do. I mean,
They admit that they do that. Yeah.
they're like not cream of the crop eggheads themselves, right? All they can do is check it against like the canon. I
And
mean,
that's what happened.
yeah.
Sal only got 3 of his patents approved out of the 5. And the 3 that they got approved, this is why it's not like disinformation. The CTO of the Navy personally stepped in to say that this was, I think he even used the words operable, but Sal refutes that, says it wasn't, they didn't actually make, I mean, I don't know if they can even say, but I think he says not necessarily operable, but there's another word for like it could be built or whatever. And then the lawyer as well. There's Navy's lawyer stepped in as well. So it's like if you were just pushing disinformation, you wouldn't have to go through all those lengths because you would just grease the wheels behind the scenes to make sure it gets approved so that China, thinks they got to build it. Plus, Sal's super panicked now about thinking that China is like literally reverse engineering, building their own, orbs and fusion reactors, which they are. They are building their own, but I don't know how advanced they're going to be.
So, uh, w- can can you clarify the connection of Paul Thibodeau to all this? Because I just realized I looked
Yeah.
him up and I actually came across one of his press releases recently.
Oh, really? Yeah, I emailed him. I wish he emailed me back. A lot of these engineers like you, I get like KG responses or no responses, which is why it blew me away when Charles Chase responded. Because like I've got this guy pegged as like he's up there with Hal Puthoff, probably knows about all the crazy stuff. And Paul Thibodeau, I don't know if it's Thibodeau or Thibodeau, he was at that conference, the APE 2022, because I was like, okay, I'm seeing Sonny White, I'm seeing Garrett Modell. I'm like, these are free energy microchip guys that I've been researching now, and these all predate all my investigation, all me believing any of this stuff could be real. So I'm like, well, who else is doing presentations? There's a Japanese guy too, weirdly talking about how 3 bodies will like basically treating it like atoms, but if you scale it up, you can imagine it's like 3 plasma orbs and like how one will interact with the other and like how they will get into certain equilibriums. And so you get to Paul Thibodeau's and his is all about, the harnessing the thermal, like just Brownian motion that's in the environment. And people are even asking him in the Q&A. They asked him a lot, of course, about the laws of thermodynamics, which really, like I said, you get into a loop on. But they were also asking him, uh, you know, personal questions about like how he got this stuff approved and how he's been doing the research on it and where he came up with it and the reaction to it. Like apparently it was one of the most popular papers of the entire year, and he was actually bragging about that as well. So you find stuff like that and you realize that there's not one way to skin the cat when it comes to the idea of free energy, and people asked him specifically, like, do you connect this to 0 point energy? And he said he didn't, but I got the distinct impression that people in the audience were connecting this. Where's this energy coming from? Even Charles Chase says, I would have only expected this to be possible if there was a temperature difference that was occurring, like a change in temperature. He asked him specifically because then you have some sort of asymmetry. You can, sap energy off that somehow. But Paul consistently keeps saying, nope, even if it's like perfectly 70 degrees, you'll still have this effect happening. And I
So
think
the
that,
effect, to clarify for people, is basically he discovered that he can take a sheet of graphene, which is a
Mhm.
molecule thick layer of carbon lattice, and put it between the plates of a capacitor. And I don't remember, I think that they charge the graphene sheet somehow.
they do.
And so as it fluctuates up and down from Brownian motion, it drives an eddy current inside the circuit. And Thibodeau is like, you can harness the
Is
uh
this like Johnson noise and resistors or something?
that I don't know. But
Um,
I think that
it
it's
is
oh,
he
go ahead.
uses diodes though, and so one of the things he does, he created just an intelligent circuit that allows for only unidirectional flow. And so what this does with the graphene is it causes it to act like a trampoline where it just keeps bouncing back and forth repeatedly. And they did all this molecular experiments to test and see what it looks like, and they found that yes, you do see this like dip up and down. And the fact that you're seeing this continually happen means that now you just created a circuit that can be put onto a microchip, and even if the energy it's producing is very small, you can be amplified, increased, whatever you need. And so a lot of these are, especially the microchip stuff, like right now, today, they're already working on ideas for stuff that they call like low power devices, stuff like pacemakers, even to phones, etc., things that are small energy devices that, or like tire pressure monitors in a car, things that like you don't need much energy for because we can already harness these tiny amounts. But you can already then see a world, especially if you're somebody who's a physicist or engineer and you're forward thinking, you're like, oh, okay, well, it's just a matter of we take this to the next level. We figure out how to amplify this more and more and more and more. Next thing you know, now we have a microchip that's got as much energy as we need. And then you have to start tough questions. So to your point before, to kind of round it back to our full discussion, it's like, how do we explain all this stuff materially? Well, I'm afraid to say that we're rapidly entering a world where we're going to have free energy microchips in our phone, and no one's going to be able to explain physically how this is actually really happening, other than people that are, more in the woo, like people like us, I suppose, who are kind of at least broaching on those topics.
But I think that Thibodeau has an explanation, and he's like, it's not really violating the third law of thermodynamics. It's just
Uh,
this ambient energy that's being transmitted into the circuit, and because we've built the conditions of it in just the right way, we can actually drive an eddy current. And so I'm like, I think that in engineering, the path forward will be owned by the people who can visualize it and the
no,
people
I
that
think you're
do
right.
have a mental model of it, because without that, I think everybody's just wandering in the dark.
And that's why those are the people that I highlight, talk about on my podcast, on my live streams, review, because I want people to see there is the physical evidence, there is the physical experiments, and these are major physicists and PhDs who are like professor emeritus at their various universities too. So it's not just fringe people talking about it. I think the fringe people are more on the conceptual, how do we understand this? What does this mean in the bigger consciousness of the universe stuff, etc. But I want to show people there is this physical basis to it so that we can demystify this whole topic so that when people see a plasma ball flying around the sky, they don't immediately go, oh, the alien invasion has begun. They might go, oh, wow, maybe we have some cool physics that, is I don't understand currently, but we might understand it and think about what that can mean for us as a civilization in the future. Because the reason why I'm so passionate about this topic, even though I'm just a healthcare IT consultant, is that I see the implications of this technology for the future. We should be living like the Jetsons, or we at least can be living like the Jetsons, or Star Trek, or who knows, possibly even a greater future than any of those.
Yeah, man, me too. I think we're on the same page about that. I mean, I think that there's a kind of moral angle to this too, which is that we shouldn't accept things that we don't understand, and we like if we just take someone's word for it, you know, the course of human history has shown no paucity of violence committed because somebody just went with the flow. And I think there's something really noble about standing up and being like, hey, this doesn't make sense. Let's try to make sense of it. And so I'm immediately oriented against anybody who's like, no, it doesn't have to make sense. And like, no, like that's not good for us as a species, like as a human race, and that doesn't want to see like horrific violence perpetrated by idiot leaders who lead us off cliffs. Like, we can understand nature, we can understand what's happening. Just because we don't yet doesn't mean that the explanation's not out there. It is.
And I want to add to that something that we kind of very briefly touched on, but didn't really get a chance to explore, is that this isn't a this isn't advocacy for a purely materialist interpretation of the universe.
No, no, no.
It is not the fact that physics is all that there is, and the only thing that is worth discussing is the influence of material bodies on one another. It's just to say that if we're going to build a technology, we have to understand the physical side of it. If we're going to build ourselves, then we actually have to understand something that is far more esoteric and far more mysterious,
Mhm.
because the place where spirit and consciousness and this like vital force, whatever people have called it over the ages, exists is inside of living beings that take ideas and transmute them into physical reality. Like there's a difference between somebody who is a super mathematical genius and goes to work for Palantir versus somebody who is a super mathematical genius and is trying to figure out how to provide free energy for everybody on Earth. Like,
And I think that's when people react against materialism, that's what they're reacting against. They look at stuff like Silicon Valley. They look at all these eggheads who don't have an actual spiritual orientation towards the future that is something we would all agree upon. I think people are really concerned about that because they're like, look, there's clearly more to life than what the atoms are doing. I mean, there's a bunch of atoms grouped together into people having a conversation right now. That's completely bananas that even happens. Like, there's something else going on in the universe, obviously.
And each of us has to maintain the sense of that because it is not just what you can do, it is what you should do. And understanding the physics lets you figure out what you can do. But there's nothing in the equations or the massing interactions of bodies that produces an answer to like what should be done. And that's the place where like the spirit and the consciousness and everything else lives. And so you can't have one without the other, I don't think.
No, I agree. And I think that for me, the more I've learned about physics, the more actually spiritual it's made me. The more
Hmm.
I've learned, okay, space is not potentially empty. But I always like to keep myself grounded in the reality of the experimentation and the results and what the observations show. Because yeah, I mean, we can speculate for days on what the meaning of everything is, but at the end of the day, really, what I want to know is just what can we do with it, and how can we use it to improve our future. So that's really been my focus on all this.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you spending the morning with us. And
Yep.
yeah, are you down in San Diego, by the way?
No, I used to live there though.
Okay,
Lived there
okay.
for quite a while in North County actually. It's
Hmm.
Where are
pretty
you?
nice.
Where are you
Now I live
physically?
in Minneapolis now though, or St. Paul
Okay,
actually, technically Twin Cities in
okay.
Minnesota. Moved back home. This is where I'm from originally once upon a time.
Right on.
So
I was gonna say
yeah.
we're in San Diego a lot, so I was gonna see if you
Are
want to
you?
get some
Oh,
coffee at some point, but I never
oh
ever go to
really?
Minnesota, unfortunately. So,
I
but
hear it's very nice though.
if
Where
you're
do
ever
you
out
guys
on the
live
West
though?
Coast, man, you should.
Yeah, where are you
If you
guys
want to,
living though?
we're in Oregon in the middle of nowhere, but
Oh,
we
okay.
spend a lot of time in San
Yeah.
Francisco. We're up and down the coast, and so I don't know. It'd just be fun to. I love
Yeah,
to
I've just
meet
kind of
people in
discovered your
person.
guys'
So
podcast. It's pretty cool though. I mean, I like what you guys have been doing, and I like that you guys take a serious approach to it. I also like that you challenge some of the stuff as well. I feel like people are kind of afraid, and I think it's like a clout thing. Like people are afraid to challenge their guests sometimes a little bit,
Mm.
where it's like, I didn't expect this, but now I've done lots and lots of podcasts. Like rarely, or a lot of people I feel like I like just kind of want to give you the leeway. I kind of want people to be like more like let's have debates, especially when it comes to like physics and stuff. Like
hell
I
yeah.
would wish people were a little more not afraid to be adversarial with other people. Where I feel like, especially in the academic world, everybody wants to be buddy buddy and not hurt ever like challenge another person. Where if we did more of that, I think we could get to some of what we were talking about here, some of these answers on
And I
some of
think we
this
need to
stuff.
learn how to do it in a way that like results in us being friends at the end of the day. Like I want my
Exactly.
friends, like I want to have my friends come over and be like, "Hey Shiloh, like that doesn't make any goddamn sense," and tell me why. Like those are the good friends to have around, especially as you like climb whatever ladder you're climbing. Like you're gonna find yourself surrounded by fewer and fewer people like that. And I would love to see a culture of really challenging thought that isn't violent in the way that you can't actually go and have dinner together afterwards. There's got to be a
We've lost
better
that.
way. Yeah.
Politically, we've lost it too. I mean, just from a standpoint, I grew up in an age in the '90s where it was like they would just all the time talk about like I don't agree with you, but I'll fight to the death your right to say whatever you believe in. And now it's like nope. Now we live in a cancel culture age where if you don't believe the exact same thing that I believe in, we can't be friends, and I also hate you. It's like, oh man, really?
It's
Okay.
so unproductive.
No wonder we can't get anything solved. And we found that it was the case in the UFO community too, which I did not expect when I was
Mm.
getting involved in this. Was like there's also this weird political line in the UFO community too.
It's
Like,
the
aren't
same
we
thing
talking
in
about
French
aliens?
physics.
And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and in physics too. So I
That
don't
might
know.
be like a weird fingerprint of shadow influence.
It could be because you wonder and you go, man, this just kind of divides us for no reason, right? All these little political things. And I looked at it all as kind of just a big distraction. I kind of used some of the stuff in joking ways just for humor or what have you. But end of the day, most of the political social issues are just insignificant in the comparison. If you compare it to the significance of like, fusion energy for the world, stuff like
Right.
that. So
Which is why I'm saying seriously, man. I really am trying to build a network of people here.
yeah.
We've done these conferences in person a couple times now. It's been really cool to get people who would have never come together to be having dinner together, and like That's what I'm saying, man. Like, seriously, if you're ever out here, like,
I
shoot
will.
us a text or whatever, because I love to meet people in person, and I really want to
Where in
connect
Oregon
people
are you guys at, by
physically
the
to
way?
one another. We are in absolutely the middle of nowhere, but
Well, you'd be
like,
surprised some of the places I go to
all
too. Like
right,
for the
we're down
DX.
near like the Rogue. We're in the Rogue Valley, basically. There's a cluster of towns there. We don't live in any of them, but there's like Medford, Ashland, Grants Pass, and we're in that area.
It's like 40 miles north of the California border.
But like
Okay.
I said, we're in Portland, we're in San Francisco, we're in San Diego, we're in LA. So
Yeah.
if you know, I don't know. I'm just saying, I don't know if I just hope we get to cross paths in person. I love bringing people together. I love meeting people and actually
Sounds good.
developing these relationships. I think
Yeah, you
it
guys
goes a
should.
long way for us all to kind of stick together in terms of people who are pursuing, who are seekers. You know, trying to understand stuff outside of the conventional structures. It's really important that we all stick together.
We should ping some of those people that I was mentioning too, because like you guys have the right kind of podcast where I think it's inviting for them, and they'll feel like they'll get a platform where they can say what they want to say about the science stuff, and you can press them in the right ways that they won't feel too threatened by. Like for me, I think some of it is like, okay, if I'm right about some of these people are straight up just lying, hiding information, and they're probably a little afraid that it might come out in a conversation, but I mean, your guys' conversations, I really, I think, do a good justice of, okay, you tell us the physics, you guys can understand it, right? And you can challenge them in the right ways, and have these like important conversations with them that I think need to be on the internet. Whereas otherwise, and I don't want to hear a conversation with them on CNN or some BS, right? I want to hear it with like real people that understand the science, that are actually trying to get to the truth. So
Hell yeah,
definitely recommend pinging some of those people.
it's going down.
Yeah.
All right,
Cool.
Ashton, we'll
Thank you guys.
let you get on with your day, man. But yeah, it's been really cool to hang out with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys very much for having me on. Appreciate it.
All right, take care, man. Bye,
Bye, everybody.
everybody.